Story 1. My sister framed me, cried to my parents, and got me thrown out barefoot at 15. Weeks later, she bragged about it, and Mom overheard everything. Kyle, an 18-year-old guy, was 15 when all of this occurred. And if you asked my family to characterize me back then, they would most likely mention the problem. My father was among those who believed that respect was a one-way path. You either give it to him without question, or you receive the belt of his voice and sometimes his actual belt. My mother followed his lead as if it were gospel. Then there was Becca, my sister, who was 2 years younger and yet the perfect child. She could set the kitchen on fire while making popcorn, and my dad would call it a learning experience. I forgot to mow the grass once, and I'm irresponsible and heading nowhere in life. That is how it has always been. Everything she did was forgiven. Every action I took demonstrated that I was doomed to make mistakes. If she passed an exam, it was because she was diligent and intelligent. If I passed a test, it was due to luck. She was the golden child, and I was the one that brought the family down. I'd always thought it was unjust, but I never imagined she'd take it to that level that night. It started normally. I was in my room with my ancient laptop, fiddling with some music downloads and half-assing homework. It was late, possibly past 11 o'clock. My door swung open so hard that it struck the wall, and both my parents stormed in as if I had set off an alarm. My mother's face was flushed, and my father's veins were visible on his forehead. Behind them, Becca pretended to cry so hard that she should have received a medal. "He stole it. I saw him take it from Dad's wallet," she wailed, pointing directly at me. "What?" I sat up straight, perplexed as heck. Dad is already storming across the room, looking around like he's on an investigation show. Then he grabbed my pillow, lifted it, and there it was. Crumpled bills, possibly worth $300 to $400, were pushed behind it. I swear my stomach sank through the floor. "I told you," Becca exclaimed, crocodile tears streaming down her cheeks. My head couldn't even process. I had not touched his wallet. I hadn't even gone near it. But before I could say anything, Dad was in my face, jabbing his finger at my chest. "You embarrassed this family for the last damn time. You think we didn't notice things missing before? You think we're stupid?" I jumped up abruptly, shaking my head. "That isn't mine. She planted it. She's lying. Why would I take money when I've been saving every penny I could from babysitting and mowing lawns? Ask Mrs. Novak next door." Enough!" He barked so loudly that it rattled my glass. "A liar and a thief. You've made this house a joke." I turned to my mother for support, but she didn't even look me in the eye. She repeated what Dad said. There were no questions, as if it were the law. Meanwhile, Becca stood behind them, head lowered like a saint. But I noticed the sneer, that little flicker of joy on her lips, as Dad began tearing up my room, tossing my belongings into a trash bag as if I were some stray they were discarding. "Dad, please. It isn't true," I exclaimed, my voice breaking. But it didn't matter. He snatched my rucksack from the corner, dumped it onto the bed, and began filling it with odd clothes. Mom began to say something, but a frown from Dad silenced her. Becca let out a big sniffle. "I'm terrified to even share a house with him because he gets so angry. What if he hurts me? That cut worse than anything." I spun toward her, my heart hammering. "What are you talking about? I've never laid a hand on you." But the harm had already been done. Dad clenched his jaw. "That's it. Out now." They thrust the bags into my arms and dragged me down the hallway with Becca trailing behind, whispering, "I told you they'd believe me." When we reached the front door, Dad jerked it open. The night air struck me like ice. I was barefoot and still wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. Dad shoved me onto the porch so forcefully that I stumbled. My sneakers were still at the door, so I grabbed them before he could close it completely. "You don't come back here until you're ready to admit what you did and apologize to your sister," he said quietly and definitively. "I didn't do anything," I exclaimed, my throat raw. "She's lying to you. She set me up. Don't you dare talk about her like that," my dad said. "She's been nothing but good to this family. You're jealous, Kyle. Jealous and bitter." The door slammed shut, shaking the glass panes. For a few moments, I stood there, garbage bag dropping from my arms, waiting for it to swing open again to discover they just kicked out their own child over some tears and planted cash. It never did. I sat down on the porch steps, shivering, and looked out at the peaceful street. I wasn't only grounded. I wasn't only in trouble. I was out exiled. I'm 15 years old and standing outside my own house with nothing but a trash bag of clothes and a backpack. I knew my sister had won. She had their trust, affection, and unwavering commitment, and I was disposable. I recall gripping the trash bag as if it were a lifeline. My chest so tight I could hardly breathe. Part of me wanted to rush back inside and pound on the door until they listened. Another portion realized it wouldn't matter. They had made their choice. And as I eventually stepped off that porch and began heading into the night, one idea burned brighter than the rest. They'd choose to trust her lies than my truth. That's when I understood I wasn't the only black sheep. I had already been cut out of the herd. The first night, I went around the block till my legs hurt. I wasn't even sure where I was headed. It was late and freezing, and I was clutching a garbage bag like a runaway. I considered crashing at the park, but the benches were soaked from sprinklers. Then it struck me. Lindsay lived a few blocks over. She'd been my best friend since middle school, so I believed maybe her folks would let me spend the night. Her eyes widened as she noticed me standing there in sweatpants, carrying a garbage bag. She let me in quickly, whispered inquiries, and I informed her that they had kicked me out. She didn't seem astonished, just sad. She gave me a blanket on the floor and some leftover pizza, and I slept more soundly than I had in weeks. Her mother was not as forgiving. The next morning, she approached me privately. She wasn't nasty, just straightforward with me. "Kyle, you can stay for a few nights, but I can't afford another mouth. You'll have to figure something out." I nodded, pretending everything was okay, but my stomach wrenched. Lindsay's mother drove me to school early on the third night and told me I couldn't return. That was it. I placed my garbage bag inside my locker and pretended I had somewhere else to go. From then on, I began couch surfing. A classmate let me crash on their sofa for the night. Another let me remain in their basement, but only for tonight. People did not want to cope with the drama in my family. After approximately a week, I was out of alternatives. That was when I began sleeping wherever I could. Behind the gas station in a nook near the dumpsters where the light did not shine. I used to be able to hide until closing time at the library, but the security guy found me after a couple of nights and kicked me out. I tried the school bathroom once, shutting myself in a stall, but someone came in, noticed my bag, and word traveled quickly. Hunger was terrible than cold. I had maybe $40 saved from cutting lawns and babysitting. That money was quickly spent on cheap hamburgers and vending machine munchies. Following that, I either missed meals or drank from water fountains. My stomach grumbled loudly in class. I would receive looks. School didn't make things simpler. Becca worked quickly. At the end of the first week, everyone had heard the story. How I stole money from my father, how I was booted out. She made it sound like I was a junkie in training. When I sat down next to them, the kids brought their backpacks closer. Teachers gave me long stares that indicated they'd already been warned about me. As I sat down in arithmetic class, a female moved her notepad. "Sorry, I don't want my stuff stolen," she whispered under her breath, just loud enough for everyone to hear. The entire row snickered. I wanted to yell, but I knew it wouldn't help. One day in the hallway, Evan, a basketball player, shoulder-checked me and yelled, "Watch your hands, thief!" I shoved him back out of reflex, and for a brief moment, I believed we were about to swing. A teacher broke it up, but I received the warning, not him. "One more incident, Kyle, and you're suspended." I heard this everywhere I went. Becca shines, I sink. She made it loud enough so that everyone knew she was responsible with money. Unlike some others, I believe she'd catch my glance across the cafeteria, give me a slight smirk, and then resume her lovely demeanor in front of her buddies. She relished every second of it. By the second week, I was a ghost at my own school. Nobody wanted me around. I sat alone, ate alone when I had food, and pretended I didn't care. But internally, it was eating me alive. Nights were the worst. I'd curl up with my backpack and sweatshirt over my face, hoping cops wouldn't bother me or a drunk wouldn't walk by. The chilly concrete caused my back to ache. My shoes were stinky from walking miles every day merely to waste time. And all I could think about was my own family did this to me. Not strangers, not enemies. My sister. One night, I attempted to sneak into the library again. I figured if I concealed better, maybe they wouldn't notice. I curled myself behind a row of shelves and used my bag as a pillow. Around midnight, the guard's flashlight struck me directly in the eyes. He shook his head. "You can't stay here, kid." He ushered me out the side door as if I were a trespasser. I wasn't sure where to go. And for the first time, the concept struck me. Perhaps this is precisely what they wanted. Perhaps they didn't want me alive anymore. I ended myself curled up behind the petrol station among the garbage. I closed my eyes, but all I saw was Becca's smug little face, pretending to cry as my parents shoved me out the door. She had won, at least for now. I kept telling myself that someone, anyone, would eventually listen. Perhaps the adults at school weren't completely blind. Perhaps one of my family would truly have a backbone. I was mistaken. It all started with my father finding me. I'm not sure how he knew where I was. Perhaps Becca told him. Perhaps he just drove around till he saw me. I was seated on a park bench with my hoodie drawn tight when his car's headlights struck me. He came up so fast I feared he was going to run me over. "Get in the car," he demanded, slamming the door behind him. I stayed firmly rooted on the bench. I felt my gut tighten just hearing his voice. "Now," he demanded. I shook my head. "Not unless you're ready to admit Becca lied." His face contorted like if I'd spit in it. "Don't you dare talk about your sister like that. She's been through enough because of you." "Through enough," was my reply. "She planted the money. She framed me, and you just believed her." His jaw tightened. He took a step closer, pointing his finger at me as if it were a weapon. "You're going to come home. You're going to admit what you did, and you're going to apologize, or I'll call the police and tell them you've been stealing from stores, begging for money on the street. Do you understand me?" I clenched my purse's latch. "I am not coming home to be treated like garbage again. You can call anybody you want, but I'm not going to admit to something I didn't do." For a brief moment, I believed he was going to swing at me, his fists curled and his face hot. But then he swung around, went back to the car, and took off, leaving me shaking. That was the moment it hit home. He did not want the truth. He only wanted control. The next day at school, I approached the counselor. I thought, hey, maybe they'll believe me if I just lay it all out. I sat in that office, my heart racing. I told her everything. How Becca placed the money, how she brags about it, and how my parents kicked me out. She listened, nodding with that blank expression counselors have. When I finished, she sighed. "Kyle, I understand you're under a lot of stress, but accusing your sister without evidence isn't going to help. Your parents already spoke to us. They're concerned about your behavior. They claimed you were unstable." Unstable? That word affected me the most, as if I were a ticking bomb rather than a youngster camping outside gas stations. "I'm telling the truth," I explained, my voice quivering. She simply shook her head. "Focus on your schoolwork. The best way to show your family you're trustworthy is through your actions. So basically, suck it up." That's what she intended. I attempted one more angle. I contacted my aunt from a payphone outside the supermarket. She picked up cheerfully until she heard me speak. Her tone changed as soon as I told what had transpired. "Kyle, this isn't something I can get involved in. Your parents are doing what they think is best. Maybe if you just said, 'Sorry.'" I hung up before she could finish. My own blood did not want to touch this trash. Everyone wanted the easy version of the story. Kyle is incompetent. Becca is perfect. Case closed. That night, I sat outside the petrol station, back against the wall, sipping water I'd filled in the bathroom sink, hoping to feel something in my gut. A neon sign buzzed overhead. Cars drove in and out, and I sat there unseen. Then I heard the voice that I despised the most. "Wow, didn't think you'd last this long out here." I looked up, and there she was. Becca was holding a Pepsi, casual as heck, as if she were simply passing by to say hello. I glared. "Why are you here?" she asked, smirking. "Curious, I guess. I wanted to see how long it would be before you crawled back." My fists clenched. "Why are you doing this to me? You think you had it rough? Try being me. Mom and Dad never let me slip. Not once. Every grade, every chore, every little thing I did was compared to you. If I messed up, it was, 'Don't be like your brother.' That's all I ever heard." I frowned, but she continued, her voice low and steady. "Now, for once, I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to prove anything. All I have to do is not screw up like you. And honestly, that's easy. I'm not giving that up." "You're sick," I mumbled. Her grin broadened. "What's really sick is how easy it was. Everyone already thought you were the screw-up. I just gave them proof." I wanted to shout, shove her, or something, but she leaned in, her voice lowering. "And if you keep pushing it, if you keep running your mouth about me, I'll make up something even worse, and then you won't just be homeless. You'll be locked up." She stated it calmly and confidently, which made my skin crawl. She wasn't lying. She was already planning her next move. She strolled away as if she hadn't just threatened to destroy what little I had left. And as I sat there in the warmth of that gas station sign, it dawned on me. She was not simply attempting to make me appear terrible. She wanted to utterly erase me. That thought lingered in my mind for days. Every time I tried to sleep behind the gas station or strolled around to waste daylight, it played back in my mind like an echo. Becca wasn't simply glad I was gone. She wanted to eliminate me as if I never existed. By the third week, I had sunk lower than I had imagined imaginable. My cash was gone. My phone died, and I hadn't had a real meal in 2 days. I lugged the garbage bag everywhere. School, bus stops, and parking lots. It wasn't even closed anymore. It was like a sign around my neck. Homeless loser. One night, I attempted to hide again in the school library. I reasoned that if I hid deeper behind the shelves, I might be able to avoid detection. Around midnight, a flashlight beam struck me directly in the face. Security grabbed my arm and marched me outside. "I already told you you can't sleep here, kid. Try this one more time and I'll report you. Then you'll be suspended," he stated with a smirk. It began to rain shortly after. I walked for miles, rain pouring through my hoodie, my shoes squishing with each step. My trash bag became so wet that the plastic tore, and half of my garments spilled on the sidewalk. I grabbed them up anyhow, clutching the sack tightly. Even though everything smelled of mildew, I ended up under the awning of a closed laundry. My stomach clenched with hunger, the type that made you lightheaded. That was my breaking point. I sat there shivering, thinking, maybe this is it. Maybe I'll just disappear out here and nobody will notice. That's when Lindsay arrived. She came rushing up with an umbrella, hair stuck to her forehead, out of breath as if she had been seeking. "Kyle, why didn't you answer your phone? I've been looking for you everywhere." "My phone's dead," I murmured. The truth was, I hadn't had a charger in weeks. She crouched next to me, disregarding the puddles that soaked her jeans. "You look awful." "Thanks," I replied, attempting to laugh, but my voice cracked. She placed a crumpled envelope into my hands. "Here, take it." I frowned. "What is it?" "Just open it." Inside was about $60, largely in small banknotes. My throat clenched. "Lindsay, I can't." "You can." She cut me off. "It's my allowance. I don't need it." "You do." I could not even speak. I simply nodded, hugging it as if it were the most precious thing in the world. She looked around and lowered her voice. "There's something else." Becca bragged at a party. I heard her. She told people she planted the money, that she set you up. My head snapped toward her. She admitted it? Yeah, but nobody believed her. They thought she was showing off. Some even said, "Even if it was true, you probably deserved it." It was like being kicked in the chest. Deserved it. That's what people thought of me. I rose up and paced under the awning. "If I can get someone to back me up." "They won't," Lindsay remarked quietly. "She's too popular. Nobody wants to cross her. They all think you're already a lost cause." The quiet between us said everything. It wasn't only my parents. Everyone had written me off. That night, I sat in the laundry doorway, dripping wet, my clothes stinking, and my stomach churning. As I glanced at the street, something within me hardened. If no one was going to stand up for me, I would have to do it myself. That evening, after cleaning up in a gas station bathroom, I took my damp garbage bag and began walking. I was not nervous. I was not scared. I was just finished. When I turned down our street, my chest clenched. The house looked the same as before. White siding, flower pots on the porch, the place I grew up in, but it wasn't mine anymore. I waited there for a long time, rain dripping down my hood, before heading up the driveway. I was going to walk through that door and make them hear me. Whether they liked it or not, my fist struck the door 3 times, loud enough to sting my knuckles. For a little moment, nothing happened. Then footsteps. The door creaked open, and there was Becca, as if she had been waiting. Her brows rose and twisted into a sneer. "Well, look who crawled back," she explained. I shoved past her before she could stop me. My wet shoes creaked across the hardwood. "I'm not here to stay. I'm here to talk." My mother's voice echoed through the main room. "Kyle." A second later, she appeared, drying her hands with a dish towel. Dad followed, arms folded and his face already red. "Out now." "No," I replied, chest heaving. "You're going to hear me this time. You've believed her lies long enough. Tonight, you're going to hear mine." Dad took a step forward, looming above me. "Watch your tone. You don't get to barge into this house." "And watch my tone," I said, louder than I intended. "You threw me out with a trash bag because Becca cried and waved a couple bills around. You didn't even ask for my side. Not once." "Because we know you," Dad replied sharply. "You've always been reckless, Kyle. Always jealous." Dad's face stiffened, but I continued on, fire building in my chest. "Jealous? Let's talk about that. Remember when she copied my science project? Teacher called home, and you punished me for making her cheat. She cried, and you believed her. Always the same story. She's the angel. I'm the screw-up. Doesn't matter what actually happened." Dad clenched his jaw. For a fleeting second, I saw something spark in his eyes. He knew I was correct. He knew it, but rather than admitting it, he doubled down. He took a step closer, the smell of aftershave and wrath reaching me. "Don't you stand here and disgrace your family. You've done nothing but pull this house down since you were a teenager. You want me to acknowledge we favored her? Fine, we did. But she earned it. She keeps her grades up, helps your mother, and stays out of trouble. You can't even keep a roof over your head." The words landed harder than a fist. My fists curled, but I forced myself to remain upright. "I can't keep a roof because you threw me out because she framed me, and you believed her without a second thought." Behind him, Becca leaned against the wall, sipping from a glass of water as if watching TV, a sneer on her face. I turned toward her. "Go on. Swear right now you didn't plant that money. Look me in the eye and swear it." She tilted her head, lips twitching as if she was about to laugh. "Sure, I swear," she responded, her voice full of sarcasm. I pointed at her, my voice breaking. "You hear that? You can't even take her seriously. She's lying to your faces, and you're still falling for it." Dad's face turned hot, and his hands curled again. Then, out of nowhere, he grabbed a glass from the table and threw it at me. His aim was off, but it blasted on the wall directly close to my head. Shards came down, cutting my arm and cheek. Blood dripped down, but he only pointed at the door, his voice low and quivering with wrath. "Get out before I call the cops and tell them you broke in. You want to keep making scenes? Fine, you can do it from a jail cell." I steadied myself, my breath ragged, my chest thumping, my throat burning, but I refused to cry. "You've made your choice," I remarked quietly. "You picked her. You always pick her. One day you're going to see her for what she is. And when that happens, don't come looking for me." The room fell silent, except for Becca's gentle chuckle. "Wow," she said under her breath, shaking her head. "Drama much." I retrieved my luggage from the floor and turned toward the door. Every step felt heavy, as if I were dragging chains. But I did not stop. At the threshold, I swung around one more, staring at everyone. My parents transfixed. Becca smirking. You think I'm the problem? Fine. But when the truth blows up in your faces, remember this moment. Remember I warned you. Then I wrenched the door open, went into the darkness, and slammed it behind me. The cool air hit me in the face, combining with the sting of the shallow wounds down my arm. I walked quickly, mouth hard, as if putting enough distance between myself and the home would allow me to breathe again. I got halfway down the block before I heard footsteps. Quick and irregular, as if someone were jogging to catch up. Wait up, bro. I spun around, heart pounding. And there she was, Becca, jogging behind me, calm as usual, her face shining in the dark light of the street lamp. She was smiling as if this were a game for her, as if Dad hadn't just tried to shatter me with a glass seconds before. As Becca stepped onto the porch, I thought I heard the screen door squeak behind her, but I was too preoccupied with her smug smirk to notice. My stomach flipped. What do you want now? I demanded, my tone sharper than intended. She slowed to a walk, slipping her hands into her hoodie pocket with a relaxed posture as if she were going for a late stroll. Relax. I just wanted to see how far you'd actually take this. I glared at her, my fists tightening tight as my arms ached from the cuts. Farther than you think. I'm done letting you run the show. Her grin grew, her teeth catching in the street light's radiance. You still don't get it, do you? Nobody's ever going to believe you. You can scream, cry, bleed all over the sidewalk. It won't matter. To them, you'll always be the screw-up. And I'll always be the one they're proud of. Proud? I sneered, shaking my head. You destroyed me? Destroyed you? She repeated, twisting her head as if I had uttered something amusing. Then her voice lowered, crueler. I didn't destroy you. I just gave them proof of what they already believed. That was the smartest thing I've ever done. My stomach turned, my chest tightened. Say it again, I said, moving closer. She leaned in, her voice a whisper as if she wanted to enjoy every word. I framed you. I planted the money. And I'd do it again, watching you beg while I win. That's the best part. The words sliced through me like a razor. I could almost hear the blood gushing through my ears and feel every drop dripping down my arm from where the glass shards had ripped into me. Then another voice pierced the silence. Excuse me. We froze like statues. Mom stood on the edge of the porch step. Her face was pale, and her arms were crossed tightly across her chest. She must have followed Becca out without us noticing. For once, her eyes were not filled with rage toward me. They were focused on Becca. What did you just say? Mom said, her tone stern, as if she didn't recognize the daughter in front of them. Becca stiffened, the smirk slipping straight off her face. Mom, it was nothing. He's twisting it. Don't lie to me, Mom said, walking down onto the sidewalk. Her voice shook, but her expression was dead serious. I heard you. You admitted it. You said you planted the money. For the first time in weeks, I felt something crack open inside me, a glimmer of hope. My chest clenched, and words tumbled out before I could control them. You heard her, Mom. You finally heard her. Becca's mouth opened and then closed again. There were no excuses, phony tears, or quick spins on the story. She was rattled. The screen door smashed against the frame, and Dad stormed onto the porch, his words echoing around the yard. What's going on? Mom turned to face him, her hands shaking. She admitted it. Martin, she just admitted she framed Kyle. Dad blinked, his face losing color. His pace slowed as he approached the bottom of the porch, as if he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the response. He looked at Becca, his jaw set. Is that true? Becca's lip twitched. She looked between me, Mom, and Dad, panic flashing through her eyes. Her fingers fidgeted within her hoodie pocket, clawing at the fabric. She opened her mouth as if to deny it again, but her expression twisted, and the words came out like venom. So what if I did? I had to. You two always leaned on me to be the perfect one, the example. I couldn't risk him screwing that up, so I took care of it. I made sure he was the one you gave up on. Her voice cracked with the final words, but the harm had already been done. The hush that followed made the air feel dense. Mom staggered back, her hand reaching for her mouth. Oh my God! Tears streamed down her cheeks, and her body shook as if she had just been sucker punched. Dad's jaw tightened and his hands curled again, this time at her rather than me. His face was flushed, his eyes steely, as if he were looking at a stranger in his own home. You ruined your brother's life, Mom murmured, her voice. You threw me out, I exclaimed, my throat hurting. You believed her over me. You tossed me in the street with nothing because she cried and pointed her finger. And now you hear the truth, and it's too late. Becca crossed her arms, attempting to hide the cracks in her voice with a false assurance. Don't act like you're some victim. You were always the mistake. I just made sure everyone else finally saw it. Her words hit me like another piece of glass shattered against my skin. I clenched my fist tighter, not to hit her, but to keep myself from collapsing. The silence extended. Mom sobbed openly. Dad simply gazed, gutted, as if the ground had been pulled out from beneath him. And I stood there in the street, bleeding and exhausted, but ultimately vindicated. Now they knew the truth, but it didn't erase the fact that they'd picked her over me when it counted the most. It was too late to repair the harm. The yard fell silent following Becca's confession. Mom froze, tears streaming down her cheeks. Dad seemed to have lost his composure. Becca attempted to cross her arms and appear tough, but her hands shook. For once, her little act did not work. I walked forward, drying blood streaking on my arm from the glass pieces that had cut me. My voice was rough and steady. You don't just get to stand here and act shocked. You ruined me. You tossed me out with nothing. Let the whole neighborhood think I was a thief because it was easier to believe her fake tears than your own son. You don't fix that with a couple words. You're going to fix it the right way. Dad snapped his head toward me as if he couldn't believe I was still speaking. Watch your tone. No, I replied firmly. You don't get to tell me how to talk anymore. You lost that when you threw me out. If you want me to even think about stepping back in that house, you're going to clear my name publicly. Mom blinked back tears. Publicly? I nodded. You're going to write a post on Facebook, on the church page, in the family group chat. I don't care where. You're going to tell everyone the truth. That I never stole, that you spoiled Becca and let her lies destroy me. You're going to admit it for everyone to see. Otherwise, I'll do it myself. And trust me, I'll include everything, including how Dad threw a glass at me tonight. Dad's cheeks turned red. We don't air family business online. I laughed bitterly. You already did when you threw me in the street with a trash bag. You let Becca's story run wild at school, at church, with neighbors. You were fine letting everyone whisper about me. Now you're going to be fine undoing it. Mom's weeping intensified. She turned to Dad, her voice breaking. Martin, he's right. We did this. We let it happen. She waited for him to respond as she always did, but he remained stiff, fists tight, and no words came out. For the first time, his silence did not protect her. It dragged her down with him. Mom had always been obedient to Dad's instructions. She repeated every penalty, rule, and phrase he had spoken. But tonight, his silence wasn't sufficient. He was losing control, and she recognized it. Her hands shook as she took out her phone. If you won't say it, Martin, she muttered, then I will. Dad's look pierced through her as if she had betrayed him, but she did not stop. Her fingers trembled as they lingered over the screen. Tell me what to write, she asked me. Becca's head jerked towards her. What? Mom, you can't. Quiet. Mom snapped, her voice shrill. You did this. You brought us here. I walked closer, heart racing, and dictated slowly. We need to apologize publicly. Our son Kyle was wrongly accused of stealing. The truth is, our daughter Becca framed him and we believed her. We spoiled her, protected her, and let her lies destroy his reputation. We failed as parents. And Kyle deserves to be seen for who he really is, not the scapegoat we made him. Mom typed every letter with her hands trembling. Dad stood straight, his face hard as stone. But he did not stop her. She hit the post. The words were out there. The damage could not be undone. Within minutes, her phone was buzzing with notifications. Comments poured in from relatives, church members, and even neighbors. "We did not know. I'm really sorry, Kyle. It takes guts to admit this." Dad's face became pale as more and more piled up. He was aware that his iron control had been lost. Becca snapped. "You just ruined my life," she exclaimed. "Everyone's going to hate me now." Dad rounded on her, his voice low and threatening. "No, Becca. You ruined your own life." Her face collapsed for the first time. There was no grin or phony tears, only panic. I stood there, bleeding and drained, yet lighter than I had felt in months. "You wanted me gone, Becca. You wanted me erased. Now it's your mask that's erased. Everyone knows who you are." She stared at me, yet her voice was shaky. "You think they'll ever forgive you? You'll always be the one who caused drama." I came closer, my gaze fixed on hers. "No, I'll be the one who survived it. You'll be the liar who got caught." The silence was profound, broken only by Mom's muted tears and the continual pinging of her phone. Dad appeared 10 years older in that moment. And Becca, she finally appeared small. I put my backpack over my shoulder and walked toward the porch. "I'm taking back my bed. You're not doing me a favor. You owe me. You threw me out. Now you're going to feed me, give me a roof, and live with what you did." Nobody argued. Mom and Dad just stood there hollow. They did not attempt to block me this time. Not after the confession. Not after the post got public, and not after their precious control fell away. For once, no one dared to oppose me. Inside the house felt strange, like if I was entering someone else's home, but I was not a guest. Not anymore. I'd brought the truth to light. I had recovered what they had stolen. As I dropped my garbage bag down beside the stairs, I noticed them all waiting there. Mom's eyes were hollow, Dad's expression stern, and Becca was furious. "You wanted a perfect daughter so badly. You turned me into the villain," I murmured, my voice low but steady. "Tonight you told the world the truth. Don't think that fixes it. But at least now everyone knows what kind of family you really are." And so I marched upward, each step heavy yet steady. For the first time in weeks, I was going to sleep in a proper bed. Not because they allowed it, but because I demanded it. They had cast me away once. I was the one who chose to. Now on to the next story. Story 2. My sister-in-law tried to ban my adopted daughter from the party, but 32 relatives fought back, and she was thrown out in shame. The text lit my screen like a match. "Don't bring that outsider." I looked at my 11-year-old clutching a sparkly outfit and a handmade card, and realized tonight wouldn't be about an engagement. It would be about who gets to decide what family means. I tried to steady my breath, but when I glanced back at Sophie, beaming with pride over her carefully wrapped gift, I knew I had to protect that light at all costs. Sophie, my 11-year-old daughter, was in the kitchen showing me her clothing. "I am excited about my sister's engagement celebration tomorrow." We had adopted her 4 months before, and she was still in the trying to prove herself stage, so family events were quite important to her. She had just finished wrapping the engaged couple's gift when my phone rang. It was Vanessa, my sister-in-law. "Don't bring that outsider to the engagement party. This is for real family only, not some random charity case you picked up to feel good about yourselves." I looked at the message with disdain. Sophie looked up from the phone before I could move. "That's about me." Her lower lip trembled. I tried to turn the phone, but she had already noticed it. I'm an outsider." She was now sniffling in between phrases. "A charity case." The tears started rolling. "I'm not real family." She was practically in tears, but everyone hugged me at Christmas. "They do love you. I tried so hard to be good for you." Now she was weeping. "I saved for 3 weeks for their present. I thought if I got them something nice." She wouldn't finish. "Am I going back to foster care?" That devastated me. I drew her into a massive mom embrace. "Listen to me. You are never going back. We are going to that party. Vanessa doesn't get to decide who's family. But she said I don't match." Then we'll make you match so perfectly she can't say a word. I removed the tears. Do you want to wear the sparkly outfit you chose? Her eyes brightened up slightly. The one with rainbows. Every single rainbow. I texted the screenshot to my husband. He rushed downstairs and his jaw tightened. He knelt beside Sophie. Vanessa said that about you? She nodded. Well, Vanessa's about to learn what happens when you mess with our daughter. Sophie's eyes widened as she heard the term daughter. My phone rang. Go get your sparkly outfit. We're adding to it. My sister Julia is getting married. Mom just forwarded me Vanessa's text. I'm livid. Put me on speaker. I did. In fact, Sophie, honey, I need you at my party. In fact, I have a special job. You're going to help me with something secret. Sophie smiled. Really? Really? And wear your best outfit. Vanessa texted Sophie again as she tried on her outfit. Just confirming you received my message. I assume she will not be there. I did not react. My mother-in-law called, though. I saw Vanessa's texts. That woman married my son, but she's never been family like Sophie is. She heard. Grandma said, I'm family. Baby, you've been family since day one. That's when my teenage nephew, Vanessa's own son, emailed me. Mom's being weird about Sophie. I'm wearing a matching sparkly bow tie tomorrow. Vanessa's own kids were rebelling. We quickly went shopping for accessories such as glittery platform shoes, diamond-shaped hair accessories, and a rhinestone-encrusted pocketbook. Is this too much? Sophie inquired. It's perfect. Vanessa's going to lose her mind. I told her. She smiled. Good. Sophie prepared another gift that evening, a large handcrafted card with congratulations and stickers for everyone in the family. Vanessa contacted my husband, but we let the message go to voicemail. I'm not trying to be mean, but tomorrow is about Julia, not your little charity project. I'm thinking of Julia's happiness. The family group chat erupted when Julia declared, everyone wear something sparkly tomorrow, even if it's just a sock to match Sophie. Vanessa quickly texted the group. Julia said, that's not necessary. Sophie practiced walking in her platforms, saying, yes, it is. What if Vanessa blocks the door? Then we go through her. My husband responded. But what if? No what ifs. You belong there. Sophie changed into her full attire the following morning. Do I look like I belong? You look like you own the place. In the car, she hugged both gifts. Mom, what if nobody else were sparkles? They will. What if Vanessa says something mean? Then everyone will see exactly who she is. We arrived at the venue. Vanessa was stationed at the entrance like a guard. Her countenance changed from confident to volcanic as she saw Sophie in her sparkling glory. But before she could say anything, Julia came through the door in her dress. Sophie, my special helper. She raced over and scooped Sophie up. You look perfect. Come on, we have work to do. Vanessa's mouth opened, but Julia had already whisked Sophie inside. The entire family was there, all dressed sparkly, grandparents in glitter bow ties, aunts in glitter scarves, and Vanessa's own children in rhinestone accessories. The newest addition of our family. Vanessa stood motionless as her own children ran to embrace Sophie. We love your outfit. You look like a disco ball, her teenage son exclaimed. This is our cousin Sophie, everyone. Julia raised her glass while toasting. Before we celebrate, I need my special helper. She drew Sophie up next to her. This amazing girl joined our family 6 months ago and made it complete. Sophie, will you be my flower girl? The entire venue erupted. Sophie's hands rushed to her mouth. Vanessa's face was purple. Julia nearly burst into tears as Sophie handed her the family card. It's perfect, Julia said. This is going in our wedding album. Vanessa tried to dispute the mess, but Julia's fiancé yelled, this is what family does. Vanessa stood up, documents in hand, and began moving to the center of the room. She cleared her throat aggressively. Vanessa raised her arm high, clutching a stack of papers in her fist. Everyone needs to hear this. The entire room became silent, and every single guest turned to look at her. Sophie's small hand gripped mine so hard that I felt she'd break my fingers. I have documentation here about adoption fraud that proves this child does not belong in our family. Vanessa waved the papers around as if they were winning lottery tickets. People began whispering and looking at us and Vanessa. My heart was racing, but before I could react, Julia was storming across the room in her engagement gown. She reached Vanessa in approximately 3 seconds and pulled the papers right out of her grasp. The sound of paper tearing filled the still room as Julia ripped them apart without glancing at what they stated. Anyone who doesn't support all members of this family can leave right now. Julia hurled the ripped pieces into the air, which fluttered down like confetti. Vanessa's face turned purple, and she began yelling about evidence, legal guardians, and the fact that we were not Sophie's biological parents. My husband stepped forward from behind me, straight up to Vanessa. "You need to leave this party immediately." His voice was calm, but his hands were quivering with rage. Vanessa started shrieking that she had proof and that everyone should know the truth about our unlawful adoption. Marcus eventually pushed past the mob as if he wanted to dissolve into the floor. "Vanessa, please let's just go." He reached for her arm, but she wrenched it away, yelling about attorneys and papers. Marcus turned to face everyone, his cheeks flaming red. "I'm so sorry about this." He reached for Vanessa's elbow to help her to the exit, but she pushed him back. Claire Monroe, the venue manager, appeared with 2 security guards right behind her. She walked up to Vanessa with a professional smile that did not reach her eyes. "Ma'am, you're disrupting this event, and I need you to leave voluntarily within the next 2 minutes, or these gentlemen will escort you out." Vanessa looked at the security guards, then back at Claire, but remained standing there as if she were rooted to the floor. Vanessa's adolescent son stood up from his seat. "I'm staying at the party with my cousin Sophie." He marched right by his mother and hugged Sophie in a massive hug. His younger siblings rose up and ran over to join the hug, leaving Vanessa standing alone at the exit. My mother-in-law rose from her seat and gently approached Vanessa. She came to a halt directly in front of her and spoke just loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I'm ashamed of your behavior. Sophie has been my granddaughter for 6 months, and your prejudice won't change that." Vanessa's mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no words came out. She grabbed her purse and stomped towards the door. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer about this illegal adoption." She slammed the door so furiously that the entire room shook. Marcus remained behind, shoulders down and face still crimson. "I'll handle my wife. I promise." He looked at me, then Sophie. "I'm so sorry." Julia took the microphone from the DJ stand. "All right, everyone. It's time for my special flower girl to help me cut the celebration cake." She held out her hand to Sophie. "Come up here where everyone can see you." Sophie stared at me and I agreed. So, she walked up to the stage where Julia was waiting. Sophie stood next to Julia by the large cake and the entire audience began to shout and cheer. People were taking pictures and complimenting Sophie on how beautiful she looked in her glittery costume. Sophie appeared to be about to collapse after the cake cutting, so I brought her to the venue's prep area. She burst into sobs as soon as we entered and locked the door. Her entire body shook as she cried into my shirt. "Can Vanessa really take me away?" She could barely speak between sobbing. "What if she has real papers? What if the adoption wasn't done right?" I hugged her as tightly as I could without injuring her. "Listen to me, baby. Vanessa has absolutely no power over our family. The adoption is completely legal and final. No one can take you away from us." She started crying and asking what-if questions about lawyers, courts, and foster care. I simply kept hugging her and told her over and over that she was ours forever. And Vanessa couldn't change that. Her glittery dress was disheveled from how tightly she pressed against me, but I didn't mind. We waited in the prep room for what seemed like an eternity while she cried out her concern over what had just happened. I could hear the celebration outside, but all that mattered was that Sophie knew she was safe and loved and she would never go. Julia entered the prep room holding a little silver box that gleamed under the lights. She knelt next to Sophie and opened it, revealing a crystal tiara with tiny rhinestone flowers. Without saying anything, she carefully placed it on Sophie's head and adjusted it to suit exactly with her dazzling attire. Sophie's eyes widened as she touched the tiara with shaky fingers, and Julia drew her into a lengthy hug. I saw them hugging each other as the celebration music played softly through the walls. Julia mentioned something about family being about choosing to love one another, and Sophie nodded into her shoulder. Marcus stepped inside after hearing a knock on the door, his hands in his pockets. He requested if he could talk to us alone, and despite the fact that the room was chilly, I could see sweat on his forehead. Julia gave Sophie one last embrace before telling her to go show everyone her new tiara. Sophie walked slowly out, still stroking the gems on her head as if she couldn't believe they were real. Marcus slammed the door behind her and leaned against it, his shoulders slumping forward. He began telling how Vanessa had been trying to adopt for 2 years without luck and how seeing us with Sophie made her insanely envious. His voice cracked as he admitted he should have stopped her sooner, but he hoped she would settle down on her own. I wanted to be angry with him, but he looked so miserable standing there, apologizing over and over. We returned to the celebration where Sophie was besieged by relatives who wanted to touch her tiara and tell her how beautiful she looked. Sophie's smile grew larger as the photographer continued to pull her apart for photos with various family members. Grandma made careful to capture a photo with just the two of them wearing identical glittery accessories. Vanessa's children remained close to Sophie the entire time as if they were sheltering her from their absent mother. Sophie wore her tiara throughout the party, even as we ate cake and danced. Sophie stood in our bedroom doorway, clutching her beloved bear, and begged if she could sleep with us. She climbed into the center of our bed and curled up small between us, pressing her back into my chest. My husband reached over and grabbed her hand as she questioned Vanessa's ability to take her away. We spent hours in the dark, assuring her she was stuck with us for good and that no one could change it. She fell asleep holding both of our hands, but awoke twice crying from nightmares of attorneys and courts. We had to repeat the assurances and embracing until she calmed down enough to sleep again. The next morning, as I was making breakfast, my phone rang and it was Marcus who sounded worried. He stated that Vanessa had spent the entire night on her laptop researching adoption rules and printed out articles regarding contested adoptions. He was trying to divert her, but he wanted us to know she wasn't abandoning her mad scheme. I hung up and quickly called our adoption lawyer, who had handled Sophie's case 6 months before. When I told her about Vanessa, she chuckled and said there was nothing a sister-in-law could do to oppose an already finalized adoption. She offered to prepare a formal letter if necessary, but stated that Vanessa had no legal standing whatsoever. While I was on the phone, our family group chat became inundated with messages from guests at the celebration. Cousins and aunts were posting images of themselves with Sophie, all wearing glittery accessories and expressing their joy that she had joined the family. Someone shared a video of Sophie receiving her tiara and it quickly garnered thousands of heart emojis and comments about how adorable she was. Vanessa must have seen all of the messages because she started her own group chat which excluded us and everyone who had defended Sophie. She tried to convince people that we were concealing information about the adoption and that she was concerned about Sophie's background. Only 2 distant cousins answered and both advised her to drop it and quit causing trouble. Marcus emailed me screenshots of Vanessa's chats, and I could tell she was becoming increasingly frantic with each one. Things appeared to be quieter after 3 days until Sophie's school counselor called me at work. She claimed Sophie had a panic episode during social studies when the teacher discussed lawyers as part of a government lesson. Sophie began crying and couldn't catch her breath, so they had to take her to the nurse's office. Sophie repeatedly asked the counselor if attorneys could take children away from their parents, and nothing they said calmed her down. I left work right once and found Sophie still in the nurse's office, her eyes red and puffy, her glittery purse gripped in her lap. She threw herself at me the moment I stepped in and refused to let go, even after I tried to sign her out. She spent the entire trip home wondering what would happen if Vanessa hired a lawyer and whether judges could force her to return to foster care. That afternoon, I began calling therapists specializing in adoption trauma and family conflict difficulties. The receptionist at one office stated that they had someone named Evelyn Ma who was fantastic with children and had openings later in the week. I scheduled the first available appointment and jotted down everything that had transpired so I wouldn't forget anything significant. Sophie spent the remainder of the day following me around the home, as if she was scared I'd disappear if she looked away. While I was in the kitchen cooking Sophie a snack, my phone buzzed with a text from Julia. She stated that she will officially remove Vanessa from the wedding guest list unless she immediately apologized to Sophie. She'd previously spoken with the venue management about arranging extra security in case Vanessa attempted to crash the wedding. I handed Sophie the message and her eyes widened as she realized Aunt Julia had chosen her over Vanessa. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang and there stood Marcus holding a large bunch of flowers and wearing the most embarrassed expression on his face. He stepped down to Sophie's level and offered her the flowers, apologizing for not stopping his wife sooner. He promised to get Vanessa into counseling and asked if we could all work together to fix things eventually. Sophie accepted the flowers but remained pressed against my leg, not ready to fully trust him yet. Marcus stayed for an hour, mainly sitting quietly as Sophie showed him her school projects from across the room. He kept apologizing every few minutes until my husband informed him we had heard him and needed time to process it all. After Marcus left, my mother-in-law called to say she was planning a special supper for everyone who had supported Sophie. She made it plain that Vanessa was not invited, and she wanted Sophie to see how many family members supported her. Sophie's favorite delicacies had already been ordered from 3 different restaurants for the weekend's dinner at her home. That Friday night, we stepped into Grandma's house, which was packed with cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends. Everyone had made Sophie cards expressing how much they appreciated having her in the family. Vanessa's own children had created the largest card coated in glitter with the words, "Best cousin ever," across the front. Sophie sat in the middle of the living room floor, opening card after card while tears streamed down her face. Her teen cousin read it aloud, stating, "Sophie was the coolest addition to their family in years." The smaller children climbed on top of her in a gigantic cousin hug, which evolved into a tickling match. We shot so many images that night that Sophie asked if we may frame each and every card for her bedroom wall. Monday morning, I received a certified letter from a law firm that made my blood run cold. Vanessa had issued a formal cease and desist order saying that we were distancing her children from their mother. She asked us to stop allowing her children to visit Sophie and accused us of turning them against her. Marcus called within minutes after receiving the letter, completely shocked by what his wife had done. He'd already contacted the lawyer to withdraw the entire case and was headed to the office. 2 hours later, he texted us a copy of the attorney's response to Vanessa. The lawyer had charged her for 3 hours of wasted time and declined to pursue her matter further. He stated that she had no legal standing to take action against us for a legally adopted child. Vanessa reportedly had a fit in the lawyer's office and was ordered to leave by building security. Sophie's first visit with Evelyn Ma, the therapist we discovered who specializes in adoption concerns, was on Thursday. I stayed in the waiting room for an hour trying not to worry about what they were discussing. Sophie smiled as she showed me a paper with breathing exercises Evelyn had given her. She demonstrated the visualization technique in the waiting area by closing her eyes and taking deep breaths. Sophie, according to Evelyn, would do these exercises whenever she was terrified or worried about Vanessa. That night before bed, I watched Sophie carefully complete each exercise, counting her breaths and visualizing herself in a safe location. She'd chosen our living room on movie night as her visualizing location with all of us sprawled on the couch together. The next day, we met with Sophie to devise a safety plan in case Vanessa ever approached her. We typed down all of the vital phone numbers on a card for her glittering purse, including mine, Dad's, Grandma's, and even 911. We practiced what she'd say and do if Vanessa showed up at school or elsewhere. Sophie practiced calling for help and ran to the nearest adult, becoming more confident with each practice run. She carried that card in her purse and looked for it every morning before school, like a security blanket. Julia picked up Sophie on Saturday morning for a special girls' day of shopping for flower girl outfits. They visited 5 different boutiques, trying on every style and color combination they could find. Sophie texted me photos of her in each dressing room, whirling in circles and making hilarious faces in formal gowns. They finally discovered the right garment in a small store, white with rainbow ribbon trim that made Sophie squeal with delight. Julia purchased matching shoes and a tiara, as well as a backup dress in case something went wrong with the first. They arrived home with bags of accessories, and Sophie modeled the entire costume for us 3 times. That evening, when I was going through social media, I noticed Vanessa had written a lengthy rant about false families. She did not use our names, but rather talked about adults who adopt children for attention and virtue signaling. The message was definitely about us, describing adoption as a trend for people who wanted to appear good on social media. Within an hour, several family members had denounced the post as harassment and hate speech. Screenshots began to flood our family group chat as everyone expressed their dissatisfaction with Vanessa's behavior. Vanessa deleted the post within 2 hours, or the platform removed it for violating terms. Marcus texted to say he had read the post and was moving into the guest room until Vanessa agreed to get serious assistance. He texted again 20 minutes later, reporting Vanessa was screaming through the guest room door, but he was not backing down this time. Monday morning, I dropped Sophie off at school, and she virtually leaped out of the car, clutching a folder full of engagement party photos under her arm. Sophie's teacher called me that afternoon to inform me that she had given a whole presentation about being picked as Flower Girl during show and tell, replete with images of everyone in their sparkles. Sophie appeared to be more confident recently, standing straighter and speaking louder than she had all year, according to the teacher. That evening, we convened a family meeting with our 2 biological children, ages 13 and 15. They sat on either side of Sophie on the couch while we narrated what had occurred to Vanessa. Our oldest sprang up and strode around the room, his fists clenched as he contemplated what his aunt had done. Our 13-year-old daughter put her arms around Sophie and declared that anyone who interfered with her younger sister would have to deal with her as well. Sophie's eyes welled up with tears, but she smiled as her siblings squeezed her between them in a protective sandwich. Vanessa's adolescent son contacted the next day asking if he could call us via video chat after school. He emerged on screen weary and immediately asked if he could still attend the wedding even though his mother couldn't. We informed him that he was welcome and watched as his shoulders relaxed with relief. He admitted to fighting with Vanessa every day over Sophie's treatment, showing us pictures of their text exchanges in which he called her out for being nasty. He stated that his younger siblings were equally furious with their mother and had been giving her the silent treatment for days. 2 weeks before the wedding, we drove to the location for Sophie's Flower Girl practice. She wore her real dress and walked down the rehearsal aisle 12 times, growing more confidence with each pass. Claire, the venue manager, observed from the sidelines and took notes on where to place more security on the big day. She showed us the side entrances they'd be watching and described their procedure for dealing with undesirable visitors. Sophie perfected her petal throwing technique, resulting in an orderly trail of rose petals from the back doors to the altar. That night, Marcus called to say Vanessa had finally consented to attend 1 counseling session, but only to prove she was correct about everything. He seemed cautiously optimistic that a professional could reach her in ways that her family had failed to do. Marcus planned to drive her to therapist's appointment on Thursday to ensure she showed up. Sophie put out her painting tools on the dining room table on Saturday morning, announcing that she would be crafting thank you cards for everyone who wore sparkles. She labored for 6 hours straight, making 32 separate cards featuring drawings of each person in their dazzling dress. We spent Sunday afternoon addressing envelopes with Sophie meticulously writing each name in her best handwriting. She insisted on including extra stickers on the cards for Vanessa's children, who had been extremely supportive. We walked to the mailbox together, and Sophie kissed each envelope before placing it. Marcus texted that evening to report that the therapy session had taken an unexpected turn. Vanessa's therapist had allegedly been extremely straightforward with her, stressing that her behavior may be deemed harassment and that she could face legal ramifications if she continued. Vanessa had gone utterly silent throughout the session and hadn't talked for the entire journey home. Marcus claimed she had shut herself in their bedroom and he could hear her crying through the door. The following week, Evelyn called to schedule Sophie's usual appointment, noting that she was making excellent improvement. She suggested that we schedule a few family therapy appointments to help everyone process the recent events together. Sophie overheard the talk and quickly requested whether Grandma could attend one of the sessions. She stated that Grandma's encouragement meant everything to her, and she wanted to express her gratitude properly. We booked the family session for the following Tuesday, and my mother-in-law reserved her entire day to attend. The therapy room was tight with all of us crammed onto the couch, but Sophie insisted on sitting directly between me and Grandma. Evelyn led us through a discussion of how the entire scenario affected each family member. When it was Grandma's turn to speak, her voice trembled as she explained how Sophie handled Vanessa's abuse with such grace. She spoke of her pride in Sophie's courage and tenacity, wiping tears from her cheeks. Sophie went to face her grandma and requested quietly whether she might call her Grandma from now on. My mother-in-law cradled Sophie in her arms and sobbed, saying she had been Sophie's grandmother since the beginning. By this point, everyone in the room was in tears. Even Evelyn had to get a tissue from her desk. We spent the rest of the session discussing what family truly means and how love is determined not by blood or adoption paperwork, but by the decision to show up for one another every day. 5 days before the wedding, Vanessa texted me that she would not be attending or causing any problems. Marcus contacted shortly after to confirm she had booked a spa weekend for the same dates. He sounded relieved when he said that she had finally decided that remaining away was preferable to risking another scene. We spent the remainder of the week having Sophie's flower girl outfit changed one more time and practicing her petal throwing technique in the backyard. She'd throw handfuls of rose petals from her white basket, then dash back to collect them all to attempt again. The wedding rehearsal 2 days later went flawlessly with Sophie walking down the practice aisle at the venue with a huge smile on her face. The photographer, who had arrived early to investigate spots, kept taking photos of her practicing with her basket. She'd linger at each row of chairs to ensure that everyone received petals, and the photographer caught every moment. Marcus arrived at the rehearsal dinner that night with Vanessa's children, who immediately went up to Sophie with their handmade cards. Marcus approached me and mentioned that Vanessa had assisted them in creating the cards, despite the fact that she was unable to attend. The children surrounded Sophie at her table, showing her all of the glitter and stickers they had used to write "Good Luck Flower Girl" on each one. Sophie insisted on wearing her flower girl attire and the beautiful tiara from the engagement party on the wedding morning. She stepped in front of my bedroom mirror, carefully arranging it, and requested me to snap a photo for her future children. I took approximately 20 photographs while she posed at various angles, making sure the tiara caught the light perfectly. We arrived to the location early so Sophie could practice once more before the guests arrived. Sophie walked down the aisle throughout the wedding, throwing petals with perfect timing and smiling at everyone she passed. Julia hugged Sophie into a deep hug as she approached the altar before Sophie took her place alongside the other bridesmaids. Sophie stood absolutely motionless throughout the wedding, cradling her empty basket while Julia and her new husband exchanged vows. Marcus stood up during the toasts at the reception and told Sophie how fortunate the family was to have her in their lives. Sophie's face lit up when he referred to her as his niece and expressed his pride in being her uncle. Later during the dancing, Vanessa's adolescent son approached Sophie and requested a special dance in front of everyone. He exclaimed loudly that she was the best cousin ever, and soon the other kids joined them in this large circle. They were all dancing around Sophie, who was twirling in the center, her tiara shining in the lights. My mother-in-law approached me during a slow song and explained that Vanessa had seen the entire wedding via live stream from her spa. She had not remarked on anything, but she had watched from start to finish, which seemed like progress. Sophie ultimately fell asleep in my arms near the conclusion of the celebration, still wearing her tiara, exhausted by the excitement. Even while she slept, she clutched her flower basket and smiled serenely. Julia approached and whispered that Sophie had made the wedding completely beautiful, and she could not picture it without her. 2 weeks after the wedding, Sophie received a card written in Vanessa's handwriting. Inside, it simply read, "Congratulations on being a beautiful flower girl." With Vanessa's signature at the bottom, Sophie stared at it for a long time before asking whether she may write back to express her gratitude. We helped her write a brief note, and she drew a picture of the entire family, including Vanessa, standing together. Marcus texted later that Vanessa had gotten it and was in tears when she saw the drawing. 3 days later, Sophie approached me with colored pencils and construction paper, asking if she could write a thank you note to Aunt Vanessa for the card. We sat at the kitchen table together as she meticulously penned each phrase in her best handwriting, erasing and rewriting until every letter was flawless. She drew a picture at the bottom of our entire family standing in a line, and she positioned Vanessa next to Marcus, a big smile on her stick figure face. I helped her address the envelope and we walked to the mailbox where she stood on tiptoes to push it inside. Marcus called me that evening to say Vanessa had received the note, and when she saw the drawing of herself in the family picture, she burst into tears in their kitchen. Marcus visited by our house one afternoon while Sophie was at school to keep us updated on Vanessa's progress. He sat at our kitchen counter drinking coffee and told that Vanessa had been going to therapy twice a week since the wedding, and the therapist was helping her work through some profound issues from her own background. Vanessa and Marcus had apparently been attempting to adopt for over 2 years before Sophie arrived, and they had been refused by 3 separate agencies for a variety of reasons that Vanessa took very personally. The therapist explained to Marcus that Vanessa's rage at Sophie was actually envy combined with grief over their own adoption issues, and she was beginning to grasp this now, but she still had a long way to go. Marcus stated that Vanessa wasn't ready to apologize yet, but she was working on herself, which was progress. Sophie's final appointment with Evelyn Ma was the next month, and I drove her to the familiar office for the last time. Sophie virtually jumped into the waiting room in stark contrast to the terrified teenager who had attended her first consultation months before. Evelyn called us back after the session with a large smile on her face and handed Sophie a certificate she designed that said, "Certificate of Bravery," with Sophie's name and beautiful lettering. Evelyn said that Sophie had developed wonderful coping abilities and no longer required regular treatment, but we could always return if something came up. Sophie hugged the certificate the entire way home and immediately requested tape to place it on her bedroom wall next to her flower girl tiara from the wedding. 6 months after the disastrous engagement party, my mother-in-law asked us all to a 4th of July family cookout at her place. Marcus had informed us that Vanessa would be there, and it would be the first time we'd all be together since our wedding. We talked to Sophie about it beforehand, and she agreed to go, so we loaded up the car with potato salad and drove over. Vanessa was already present when we arrived, sitting peacefully at a picnic table in the corner of the yard. When we stepped in, she looked up but didn't say anything, just gave us a tiny nod before returning to her drink. Sophie remained close to me at first, but relaxed as Vanessa did not approach or say anything harsh. The kids all played together in the sprinkler while the grown-ups grilled burgers, and it was almost typical, except Vanessa and I kept our distance from each other. She departed early without saying goodbye, but Marcus later stated that simply turning up and not making problems was significant development. Sophie's teacher called in September to inform me that she had received the school's citizenship award for an essay on what family means. The ceremony was held the next Friday morning in the gymnasium, and I immediately began messaging everyone about it. My mother-in-law replied she wouldn't miss it for anything. Julia rescheduled a work meeting to be there, and Marcus even took the morning off to attend. Except for Vanessa, the entire family arrived, occupying an entire row of folding seats in the gymnasium. When Sophie's name was called, she came up to the stage and read her essay aloud to the audience, discussing how family is more than blood, but also about the people who choose to love you every day. I cried. Julia cried. Even my spouse wiped his eyes. Marcus had his phone out, capturing the entire incident, and I noticed him texting something shortly after Sophie ended. Later that evening, Vanessa texted me that she had viewed the video Marcus had given, and that Sophie's essay was lovely. Marcus texted me separately saying that was the first time Vanessa had spoken anything openly nice about Sophie, and he saw it as a significant step forward in her therapy. Christmas arrived, and we were hosting the family event at our home. Vanessa and Marcus arrived with presents, and I saw Vanessa take a wrapped box from her bag and walk over to Sophie, who was seated by the tree. She handed it to Sophie with a simple, "This is for you," and went to help in the kitchen. Sophie carefully unwrapped it to discover a sparkly picture frame with a note inside that read, "For your favorite family photo." Sophie dashed to her room and returned with the photo from the engagement party, the one where she's wearing her full sparkle outfit surrounded by the entire family, and carefully placed it in the frame. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I helped Sophie hang the framed portrait on her bedroom wall next to her flower girl tiara and certificate of bravery. Standing there staring at that wall filled in memories from this insane year. Now on to the next story. Story 3. My parents told me we can't afford the beach house this year. 2 weeks later, I saw photos of them and my siblings in a private villa. Then they called me for help with their rental problem, but I had a surprise waiting for them. We just can't afford the beach house this year, Sarah. Times are tough. My mother's voice crackled through the phone, laden with what I now knew was fake concern. Your father's business isn't doing as well as we hoped. I sat in my Manhattan apartment, staring at the calendar where I'd already blocked off the last 2 weeks of July, our family's traditional beach house vacation time for the past 25 years. The same vacation I'd already taken time off work for. The same one I'd been looking forward to all year. My name is Sarah, and at 32, I was about to discover just how deeply family betrayal could cut. Are you sure? I asked, trying to keep the disappointment from my voice. I could help with the costs. I know how much this tradition means to everyone, especially to me. I thought, remembering all the summers spent at our Hamptons beach house, the memories stretching back to when I was just a little girl building sand castles with my siblings. Oh, honey, no. Mom replied quickly. We couldn't possibly take your money. It's better if we all just skip it this year. Your brother Michael and Emma have already agreed it's for the best. I should have caught the slight hesitation in her voice when she mentioned my siblings. Should have noticed how she rushed through their names. But I was too busy trying to process the loss of our annual family gathering. Right, I said finally. Well, maybe we can plan something smaller later in the year. Of course, darling. Listen, I have to run. Your father needs me to help him with some paperwork. We'll talk soon. The call ended abruptly, leaving me with a nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. I brushed it off, attributing it to my general disappointment. After all, what other explanation could there be? 2 weeks later, I found out exactly what other explanation there could be. I was mindlessly scrolling through Instagram during my lunch break when I saw it. A photo posted by my younger sister, Emma. My sandwich fell from my suddenly numb fingers as I stared at the image. My entire family lounging on our beach house deck, drinks in hand, a golden sunset behind them. Perfect start to our annual family vacation. #FamilyTime, #sunset. The timestamp showed it had been posted just hours ago. They hadn't canceled the trip. They had just canceled me. My hands shook as I scrolled through more photos. There was Michael manning the grill, Dad opening a bottle of champagne, Mom arranging her signature seashell centerpiece on the outdoor dining table. Another post from Michael, nothing better than tradition, annual family beach vacation in full swing. The word family felt like a slap across my face. I sat there, my untouched lunch growing warm, as years of subtle exclusions and dismissals suddenly clicked into place. The forgotten invitations to weekend brunches. The family dinners I heard about after the fact. The group photos where everyone seemed to know about the color coordination except me. But this was different. This was our beach house tradition, the one thing I thought was sacred. The beach house had been in our family since before I was born. My grandfather bought it as a surprise for my grandmother in 1965, and it had been our summer gathering place ever since. I learned to swim in that ocean, had my first kiss under that boardwalk, and celebrated every major milestone with family dinners on that deck. I pulled up my mother's number, then stopped. What would confronting them accomplish? They had already shown me exactly where I stood on their priority list. Instead, I opened my laptop and started searching through old emails. There had to be a reason they felt so confident in excluding me, and I was going to find it. 3 hours later, I had my answer, and it made my blood run cold. Last year, when the family trust was being restructured after Grandpa's death, I'd signed a stack of papers Dad had brought to my office. Just routine stuff, he'd said, making sure everything's properly organized for tax purposes. I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? He was my father, a successful real estate developer who'd always handled the family's financial matters. So I'd signed where he pointed, not bothering to read the fine print. Now, looking at the copy I finally dug out of my files, I realized what I'd actually signed. A document transferring my share of the beach house ownership to a family LLC controlled by my parents. My hands clenched around the paper. They had planned this, probably for months. Get me to sign away my rights, then slowly edge me out of family gatherings until I was nothing more than a distant relative they had to tolerate at major holidays. But they had made one crucial mistake. Before my grandfather passed away, he pulled me aside during his last Christmas with us. "Sarah," he said, his voice weak but his eyes sharp as ever. "I've left something for you with Harold. Promise me you'll go see him if anything feels wrong with the family." Harold Mason was my grandfather's lawyer and, more importantly, his closest friend. I dismissed the conversation at the time, assuming it was just the ramblings of a dying man. Now, I wondered what exactly my grandfather had seen coming. I called Harold's office. "Sarah Mitchell for Harold Mason," I said when his secretary answered. "Tell him it's about my grandfather's final instructions." Minutes later, Harold's familiar, gravelly voice came through the line. "Sarah, I've been wondering when you'd call. Your grandfather was a smart man. He knew exactly how things would play out once he was gone. Can you come to my office tomorrow at 9 a.m.? I glanced at my calendar, already reaching for my laptop to clear my schedule. "I'll be there." That night, I barely slept. My phone kept buzzing with more family photos from the beach house. Sunset walks, seafood dinners, game nights. Each notification felt like another twist of the knife. I turned my phone face down, but I couldn't turn off my thoughts quite so easily. The next morning, I arrived at Harold's office precisely at 9 a.m. The office looked exactly as I remembered from childhood visits with my grandfather. Dark wood paneling, leather-bound law books lining the walls, and that same familiar scent of coffee and old paper. Harold stood as I entered. His tall frame slightly stooped now with age, but his blue eyes as sharp as ever. "Sarah," he said warmly, "you look just like your grandmother." He gestured for me to sit, then walked to his safe. "Your grandfather left this for you," he said, returning with a thick envelope, along with very specific instructions about when to give it to you. I took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter written in my grandfather's distinctive scroll, along with several legal documents. "My dear Sarah," the letter began, "if you're reading this, then what I feared has come to pass. Your father has always been ambitious, and your mother too, easily swayed by his dreams of legacy and status. I watched them slowly put aside anyone who doesn't fit their perfect family image, just as they did with your Aunt Clara years ago." I remembered Aunt Clara vaguely, Mom's sister who had chosen to distance herself from the family when I was young. I'd always accepted the family's version of events, that Clara had abandoned us. Now I wondered if there was another side to that story. "But I've made provisions," the letter continued. "The beach house isn't just a property. It's the heart of our family's memories. While your father may think he's cleverly consolidated control, he's overlooked something important. Check the original deed from 1965. Harold handed me another document, the original property deed. As I read through it, my eyes widened. "The beach house property," Harold explained, "includes not just the house, but also the private road leading to it and the small boat dock. Your grandfather never merged these parcels when he bought them, and while your father may have maneuvered to get control of the house itself, the road and dock are still under the original trust." I finished, understanding dawning. A trust that, according to these papers, now belongs to me. Harold smiled. "Exactly. Without access to the private road, the beach house is essentially landlocked. The public access road is 2 miles down the coast, and the neighboring properties have repeatedly blocked any attempts to create a new access point." I sat back, my mind racing. "So they need my permission just to reach the house?" "Indeed," Harold said. "Your grandfather believed that sometimes people need to be reminded of the importance of family. All family members, not just the convenient ones." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with another Instagram notification. Emma had posted another "perfect day in paradise." #family forever. I looked at Harold, a plan already forming in my mind. "I think it's time for my family to learn a lesson about the true meaning of family." I spent the rest of the morning with Harold, reviewing my options and forming a strategy. By the time I left his office, I had everything I needed to remind my family that actions have consequences. That evening, as I sat in my apartment looking through old beach house photos, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Sarah, honey," she said, her voice tense. "We seem to have a situation here at the beach house." I smiled, knowing exactly what was coming. "Oh, what kind of situation?" "Well, the strangest thing. There's apparently some issue with the access road. Some sort of permit problem. We can't get our cars out of the driveway." I could hear voices in the background. Dad arguing with someone, Emma's distinctive whine, Michael's attempts to problem solve. "That's terrible," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Almost as terrible as discovering my family went on vacation without me after lying about canceling it." Silence on the other end. "You know about that? Instagram is a very public platform, Mom. But don't worry, I'm sure you'll figure something out. After all, you've got the whole family there to help." Well, almost the whole family. "Sarah, wait." I hung up and turned off my phone. They had 2 weeks of vacation planned at the beach house. 2 weeks to contemplate their choices while dealing with their increasingly limited access options. Sometimes I thought, looking at my grandfather's letter again, the best lessons come from unexpected teachers. And this lesson was just beginning. The calls started at 6 a.m. the next morning. First, Dad. "Sarah, this is ridiculous. You need to fix whatever you've done with the access road. We have dinner reservations at La Mer tonight." Then Mom, "Honey, I know you're upset, but this isn't the way to handle things. We were just trying to have a quiet family vacation." Michael, "Sis, come on, you're being petty. So we had one vacation without you. It's not the end of the world." Emma, "You're ruining everything." My Instagram followers were expecting daily beach content. I let them all go to voicemail, each message more desperate than the last. Instead of responding, I spent the morning with Harold, reviewing the next phase of our plan. "Your father's trying to find a workaround," Harold said, hanging up his phone. "He's already contacted 3 different lawyers looking for loopholes." I nodded, unsurprised. "And they've all told him the same thing. The road access is ironclad. Your grandfather made sure of that." Harold smiled, shuffling through some papers. "But that's not even the best part." He handed me a document that made my eyebrows rise. "The dock. Your family's fancy boats aren't going anywhere without your permission. And according to the harbor master, they've got quite the lineup of water activities planned for the next 2 weeks." I thought about all the summers I'd spent on those boats, learning to sail with my grandfather, watching sunsets with my siblings. More memories they'd tried to steal. "Have they figured out yet," I asked, "that I'm behind this?" "Your father suspects," Harold said. "He called me this morning trying to throw his weight around. I reminded him that I represent your interests now, not his." My phone buzzed again, another family group chat message I wasn't supposed to be part of, but could still see thanks to Michael's technical ineptitude. "Mom, the harbor master says we can't take the boats out. Something about dock access." "Dad, this is Sarah's doing. Has to be." "Emma, how could she do this to us? My influencer cruise is scheduled for tomorrow." Michael, "Dad, can't you just buy access rights or something?" "Dad, working on it. Don't worry, I'll handle this." I showed Harold the messages. He always says that, "I'll handle this." It's his way of maintaining control. "Well," Harold said, eyes twinkling, "he's welcome to try. But your grandfather built this plan to be airtight. The only way they're getting access is through you." By day 3, the situation at the beach house had reached a breaking point. Without road access, they couldn't get their cars out to go shopping, visit restaurants, or attend any of their planned activities. The dock restrictions meant their boats sat uselessly in their slips. Even their grocery deliveries were being held at the main road, forcing them to walk 2 miles in the summer heat to retrieve them. Emma's Instagram stories had shifted from perfect family vacation to increasingly frantic updates about being stranded in paradise. Michael's wife was threatening to call her parents to come rescue them. Mom had resorted to hourly texts, alternating between guilt trips and attempts at reconciliation. But it was Dad's email that finally made me decide to make my move. "This childish behavior ends now," the email read. "Sarah, you're trying to prove a point. Message received. But you're only hurting yourself if you continue this ridiculous power play. You'll force me to take more permanent measures regarding your position in this family. You have until tomorrow to restore access. Dad." I forwarded the email to Harold, then picked up my phone. "Mom, we need to talk. All of us. In person." "Oh, thank goodness," she breathed. "Yes, of course. When?" "I'll be there in 2 hours. Make sure everyone's present." The drive to the beach house felt surreal. How many times had I made this trip, excited for family time ahead? Now I was driving into a battle armed with truth instead of beach toys. When I pulled up to the access gate, I saw them all gathered on the deck, watching me. I used my key, the one thing they couldn't take away, to open the gate and drive through. The humidity hit me as soon as I stepped out of my car, thick and heavy like the tension in the air. Dad stood at the top of the deck stairs, trying to project authority despite his rumpled vacation clothes. "Finally ready to be reasonable?" he asked as I climbed the stairs. I didn't answer until I reached the deck, taking in the scattered evidence of their disrupted vacation. Empty wine bottles, half-played board games, phones plugged into every available outlet as they desperately sought entertainment without their usual activities. "I thought we should all talk," I said, looking at each family member in turn. "About truth, about family, about what those words really mean." "If this is about not including you in the vacation," Mom started. "This is about so much more than that," I cut her off. "This is about years of systematic exclusion, about lying to me, manipulating me, trying to strip away my inheritance piece by piece." I pulled out the document I'd signed last year. "Like this. Dad, want to explain what this really was?" He shifted uncomfortably. "It was necessary restructuring. It was theft," I said flatly. "You tricked me into signing away my rights to the house, just like you've been trying to trick me out of every other part of this family." "That's not fair," Emma protested. "You're always so busy with work, never making time for family things." "Really?" I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my calendar. "Like the 3 family dinners last month I was never told about? Or Michael's birthday lunch? Or the weekend planning meeting for this vacation?" Silence fell over the deck. "But you know what?" I continued. "You all made one crucial mistake. You forgot about Grandpa's foresight, about the trust he left me, about the fact that this house is worthless without the access he made sure I controlled." I saw the moment it hit them, really hit them, that they weren't in control anymore. Dad's face flushed red. Mom's hands twisted in her lap. Emma's eyes filled with tears, and Michael just looked tired. "So here's what's going to happen," I said, pulling out the papers Harold had prepared. "We're going to restructure things properly this time. Equal access, equal rights, equal say in all family properties. No more secret meetings. No more manipulated documents. No more exclusive vacations. And if we refuse?" Dad challenged. I smiled, thinking of my grandfather. "Then I hope you all enjoy walking 2 miles for your groceries. The road access restrictions can last indefinitely." The negotiations took hours. By the time we finished, the sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, just like I remembered from countless family dinners on this very deck. But this sunset felt different. This sunset marked a new chapter, one where I wasn't just included in the family, but had helped reshape it into something stronger, more honest, more real. As I drove home that evening, my phone buzzed with a new Instagram notification. Emma had posted a photo of all of us together on the deck, looking somewhat worse for wear, but genuinely smiling. The caption read, "Learning what family really means. Blessed new beginnings." This time, I didn't turn my phone face down. Instead, I liked the post and added a comment. "Here's to new traditions." I watched as my family processed my words, their faces shifting between shock, anger, and denial. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy, broken only by the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore. My father's fists clenched at his sides, his jaw tight with barely restrained fury. My mother stared at the table, pretending to be fascinated by an invisible stain on the linen. Michael had his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. And Emma's eyes were glossy, her lips pressed into a pout, like a child on the verge of a tantrum. "So this is what you wanted?" My father finally spoke, his voice a dangerous growl. "You came here to humiliate us? To make us beg?" I didn't flinch. "No. I came here to make sure you never try to erase me from this family again. You all made it very clear that I wasn't wanted. You lied to me. You stole from me. You decided I wasn't part of the family when it suited you. But now that you need something from me, suddenly I matter again? I'm not playing this game anymore." "You're overreacting," Emma whined, throwing her hands up. "It was just one vacation. Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" I let out a humorless laugh. "One vacation? Then why lie? Why forge documents to take away my rights to this house? Why systematically exclude me from everything? This isn't just about a trip to the beach, Emma. This is about years of manipulation and betrayal." Michael sighed, rubbing his temples. "Okay, Sarah, we get it. You caught us. We screwed up. But what do you want? Do you want Mom and Dad to get on their knees and apologize? Do you want to keep us locked out of the house forever? What's the end game here?" I held his gaze. "I want you to understand what it feels like to be left out, to be treated like an afterthought, to be discarded until it's convenient to remember I exist. I want you to sit in this house, trapped by your own actions, and realize that actions have consequences." My mother, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke, her voice shaking. "Sarah, honey, we never meant to hurt you. It was a mistake." I scoffed. "A mistake? A mistake is forgetting to invite me to brunch. A mistake is mixing up a date. But tricking me into signing away my rights, lying about canceling the trip while you all went ahead without me? That wasn't a mistake, Mom. That was a plan." My father slammed his fist down on the table, making everyone jump. "Enough! You don't get to walk in here and hold us hostage like this. You think you can blackmail us into doing what you want." I didn't even blink. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out the documents Harold had prepared, laying them on the table. "Then sign this." He grabbed the papers and skimmed through them, his face darkening as he realized what they were. "You want to restructure the ownership? Give equal access to everyone. I want to undo what you did. You manipulated me, stole from me, and thought I'd never find out. Now we're fixing this the right way. No more backroom deals. No more exclusion. No more lying." He tossed the papers onto the table with a sneer. "And what if we refuse?" I shrugged. "Then I hope you enjoy your long walks to get groceries. The road restrictions aren't going anywhere." My mother looked at me with pleading eyes. "Sarah, this isn't fair." I laughed, an actual amused laugh. "Fair? You erased me from this family. You stole my inheritance. You lied to my face. And now that you're feeling just a fraction of what I felt, you want to talk about fairness." Emma let out a dramatic sigh. "You're ruining everything. Do you know how many brand deals I lined up? My influencer cruise is tomorrow. I was supposed to post daily content, and now I'm stuck here with nothing." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I'm sorry. Your biggest concern is that you can't post beach pictures? That must be so hard for you." My father was shaking with anger. "You think you can force us to sign? We'll find another way." I unlocked my phone and pulled up an email. "Go ahead, try. Because I already have my way." I turned the screen toward him. "Harold and I have put together a full legal case. If you don't sign, we take this to court. And imagine what that will do to your reputation, Dad. A real estate mogul who defrauded his own daughter. Think your investors will like that?" His face went pale. Silence settled over the deck. My mother stared at the papers, her hands shaking. Michael refused to look at me. Emma glared at me like I had personally ruined her life. They knew they had lost. "You have until tomorrow morning to sign," I said, my voice even. or I'll see you in court." Without waiting for an answer, I grabbed my bag and walked toward my car. But before I could get in, I heard my mother's voice behind me. "Sarah?" I stopped, but didn't turn around. "What?" "I'm sorry." I closed my eyes for a moment. I had waited years to hear those words, but now they meant nothing. I got in my car and drove away. That night, when I got home, my phone buzzed. A message from Harold. "Your father just called me. They want to meet tomorrow to sign the papers." I smirked as I set my phone down. They tried to erase me, betrayed me, but now I had the power. And this time, things will be done my way. I walked out of that house without looking back. My car glided down the coastal road, the ocean stretching out beside me. But my mind was racing. Revenge tasted sweet, but it was incomplete. Getting them to sign those papers was just the beginning. My family needed to learn, once and for all, that I was not someone they could manipulate, discard, and expect to come crawling back when it suited them. The next morning, as promised, I returned to the beach house. I arrived early, before anyone had the chance to change their minds or try to find a loophole. Harold was with me, the documents ready. When I stepped onto the deck, the atmosphere was different. The arrogance was gone. The confidence that they controlled everything had evaporated. My mother sat on the couch, staring at her hands, her face drawn with regret, real or fake. I couldn't tell. My father stood stiffly, his arms crossed, like a man trying to cling to the last shreds of his dignity. Emma slouched in a chair, scrolling through her phone, her lips pressed into a deep pout, like a spoiled child denied a toy. Michael looked exhausted, defeated, as if he had accepted the inevitable. "Good morning," Harold greeted, breaking the silence. "Let's get this settled quickly." No one responded. My father grabbed the pen first, signing with stiff, aggressive strokes. Then my mother, who sighed heavily before scribbling her name. Michael signed next, wordlessly. Emma was the last. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, snatching the pen and scribbling her name as if it personally offended her. "What was ridiculous was what you all did to me," I said coldly. Harold collected the documents, reviewed everything, and handed me my copy. "It's done," he said, satisfied. The weight of the paper in my hands was more than just legal ownership. It was the weight of years of exclusion, of lies, of betrayal. And now everything was balanced again. But I wasn't finished. "Now that everything is official," I began, sliding the papers into my bag, "I need to make something very clear." My father exhaled sharply. "What else do you want, Sarah? You already won." I arched an eyebrow. "Won? No, this was just leveling the playing field. But you all need to understand something. I will never allow you to treat me that way again." Silence. "I know exactly who you all are," I continued. "You only see me as a tool, something to be used when convenient. I spent years thinking that if I worked harder, if I was always present, if I did everything right, maybe one day you'd see me as part of this family. But now I understand that it was never in my control." My mother wrung her hands in her lap, visibly uncomfortable. "Sarah, no." I cut her off. "Now you listen. For the first time, you're not in control. I am. And here's what's going to happen. I don't need any of you anymore," Emma scoffed. "If you don't need us, why go through all of this?" I stepped closer to her, meeting her gaze. "Because you all needed to learn that you can't erase me and then expect me to be here when it's convenient." She swallowed hard. "The access to the house is restored to all of us. But I made sure that none of you can ever alter it again without my approval. Any attempt to screw me over again will be met with legal action. No second chances." My father let out a bitter laugh. "You're acting like we're criminals." I smiled. "You falsified documents to remove me from my own property. I could have pressed charges, but I decided to do something worse." His brow furrowed. "What did you do?" I took out my phone and calmly scrolled to an email. "Let's just say some people were very interested in learning about how you conduct your business. Funny how investors tend to lose confidence when they find out a businessman forged documents to cheat his own daughter." The silence that followed was deafening. My father's face went pale. "You You swallowed. What did you do? I sent the documents to some of your key contacts, I said casually. Harold ensured everything was explained in detail. You can try to spin it, of course, but tell me, who's going to trust you now? My mother gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. Sarah, you've destroyed your father. No, Mom. He destroyed himself. I just made sure he felt what it's like to be deceived. Emma shot up from her seat, her eyes wide. And me? What did you do to me? I smirked. Oh, Emma, you didn't know? Contracts are legally binding, right? Your influencer cruise? I revoked your authorization to use any part of the family estate for business purposes. Your partnerships are hanging by a thread, because no brand wants to work with someone who can't deliver what they promised. The horror on her face was priceless. You're joking. Nope. But don't worry. I'm sure your followers will love to hear about how you helped deceive your own sister. Michael exhaled, rubbing his temples. So that's it? You want to ruin us? No, Michael. I stared at him. I just want you to feel, even for a second, what I felt. You'll all survive. You'll all move on. But from this day forward, I'm not your backup plan. I'm not someone you get to erase and expect to return with open arms. They all sat in silence. You have the house back, but this family? It's done. I grabbed my bag and walked toward the door. Sarah! My mother called one last time. Can't we fix this? I turned and looked at her. No, and I left. That night, when I got home, my phone was flooded with notifications. A formal statement announced that my father was under investigation for financial fraud. Emma had posted a teary story on Instagram, ranting about how people are cruel and trying to ruin her life. And Michael? Well, Michael had gone completely silent. And me? I sat on my apartment balcony, a glass of wine in my hand, watching the city lights. For the first time in years, I felt nothing but peace. They had erased me from the family, but I refused to disappear. And now they knew exactly what happens when they try to play games with me. Now on to the next story. Story 4. I came back from my business trip earlier than expected. I didn't tell anyone I was returning. I wanted to surprise Miguel. When I arrived on our street, I saw several cars parked in front of our house. The garden was decorated with blue and pink balloons. A banner read, "Welcome our little miracle." I parked my car a street away and walked over. The door was slightly open. Music and laughter spilled from inside. When I stepped in, I froze in the middle of the living room. Carmen, my best friend, was visibly 6 months pregnant. My mother-in-law, Rosa, was gently stroking her belly while my mother served drinks. Gifts were stacked on a decorated table. So, is the nursery ready? My Aunt Elena asked. Almost, Carmen replied. Miguel insisted on painting it himself. He's been working on it every weekend. At that moment, my husband walked in carrying more drinks. He approached Carmen and hugged her from behind, placing his hands on her belly. We just need to set up the crib. We picked it out together last week. I watched as my mother stiffened upon seeing me. She quickly walked over. Anna, we weren't expecting you today, she whispered, grabbing my arm. Let's go outside. We need to talk. I pulled away from her grasp. Talk about what? About how my husband got my best friend pregnant while I was working in another country. The chatter in the room died down. Carmen was the first to notice me. Her face turned pale. Miguel stood frozen, his hands still on her belly. Anna, he began. Don't you dare. I cut him off. How long have you been cheating on me? No one answered. My father, standing in a corner, couldn't even look me in the eye. I can explain, Carmen said, taking a step forward. We didn't want you to find out like this. Oh, and how were you planning to tell me? After the baby was born? Or when they turned 18? My mother-in-law stepped in. Anna, please think about the baby. Carmen doesn't need this stress in her condition. Her condition? I let out a humorless laugh. The same condition I was in 2 years ago when I lost my baby? Where was your concern then, Rosa? The silence that followed was deafening. My mother tried again. Honey, I know this is difficult. Difficult for whom? For me, who worked nonstop for 9 months while my husband was sleeping with my best friend. Or for all of you who had to keep up the charade. Miguel finally stepped away from Carmen. Anna, can we talk privately? Don't make a scene. A scene? No, Miguel. A scene would be telling everyone how you convinced me to take that overseas job. How you said we needed the money to start our family. I turned to Carmen. Did he tell you that? Or did he say he was lonely and abandoned while his cruel wife chased her career? Carmen started crying. It wasn't like that. We didn't plan this. Of course not. I suppose you just tripped and fell pregnant by my husband? These things happen, right? The guests began shifting uncomfortably. Some grabbed their bags, ready to leave. My father finally spoke up. Anna, calm down. You're upset. Upset? No, Dad. I'm perfectly calm. In fact, I'm grateful. My mother frowned, confused. Grateful, yes, because now I see everyone for who they really are. My husband, the liar. My best friend, the traitor. And my family, the cowards who chose to protect this lie instead of me. I walked over to the gift table and grabbed one at random. This one's yours, Mom. You bought a nice gift for your son-in-law's mistress's baby. Anna, please. My mother pleaded. I tore the wrapping paper open. It was a white baby outfit with blue details. How thoughtful. I hope you kept the receipt. Miguel stepped forward, trying to take the gift from my hands. Enough, Anna. You're making a fool of yourself. Making a fool of myself? No, Miguel. You did that all on your own. Getting my best friend pregnant while I was paying all the bills. My mother-in-law stood up, outraged. This is too much. Miguel was just looking for the happiness you couldn't give him. Always busy, always working. You're right, Rosa. I was too busy working. Working to pay the mortgage on the house where your son was sleeping with my friend. I looked around the room. Every familiar face now looked like that of a stranger. You know what? You can keep the house, the furniture, the gifts. But Miguel, I suggest you get a good job because you won't have access to my money anymore. What are you talking about? He asked, turning pale. I'm talking about how, while I was overseas, I wasn't just working. I was also consulting a lawyer. I have proof of every penny I spent on this house. On you, on our marriage. I walked out of that house without looking back. My hands were shaking. My breathing was erratic. But I refused to break down in front of them. They didn't deserve to see my tears. I walked away, ignoring the curious stares from the neighbors who had probably heard every word of the scene that had just unfolded. I got into my car and slammed the door shut. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my fingers turned white. My vision was blurred, but I refused to cry. I started the engine and just drove. No destination, no direction, just getting away from that nightmare. My phone was flooded with messages. Missed calls from my mother, texts from Miguel, even Carmen. Please, Anna, we need to talk. This wasn't supposed to happen this way. You don't understand the whole situation. Oh, I understood. I understood perfectly. I understood that while I was working to support my home, my family, my marriage, they were together. I understood that every time Miguel called me saying he missed me, it was a blatant lie. I understood that every time Carmen said she was busy and couldn't talk, it was because she was busy with him. A bitter taste filled my mouth. Disgust. Disgust at myself for not seeing it sooner. After driving for a while, I pulled into the parking lot of a random hotel. I needed a place to breathe. I wasn't going back to that house that now stood as a monument to my humiliation. I walked to the front desk and booked a room for a few days. The receptionist gave me a strange look, probably because of my disheveled appearance, but handed me the key without asking questions. The moment I stepped inside the room, I locked the door and collapsed onto the bed. Only then did the weight of everything crush me. I curled up, hugging myself, and let the tears fall, tears of rage, of disgust, of a deep, suffocating pain that squeezed my chest. But I couldn't stay like this forever. I had to do something. The next morning, I went straight to my lawyer's office. He already knew about my situation and had all the necessary documents ready to ensure that I got out of this mess with as little damage as possible. I want to start the process today, I said firmly. Divorce, property division, everything. And I want it to be clear that Miguel won't see a single cent of my money. He nodded. You have more than enough evidence to contest any claim he might make. The house is in your name. All the expenses were covered by you. He has no rights to anything. I took a deep breath. Good. Then let him find out the hard way. I walked out of the office feeling an odd sense of relief. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own life. My phone buzzed. Miguel. I ignored it. Minutes later, a message popped up. We need to talk. Please, Anna. I only responded with, talk to my lawyer. Days passed, and the calls and messages didn't stop until one afternoon. While I was having coffee at a cafe near the hotel, someone approached my table. Miguel. He looked awful. Deep eye bags, messy hair, but I felt no sympathy. Anna, please. He sat across from me without being invited. I didn't want you to find out like that. I crossed my arms. Oh, but how did you want me to find out? With an invitation to the baby shower. He ran a hand over his face, exhausted. This isn't how I wanted things to happen. I made a mistake. A mistake? Getting my best friend pregnant was a mistake? No, Miguel, it was a choice. You chose to sleep with her. You chose to lie to me. You chose to let everyone cover for you. He lowered his head. I was lonely, Anna. You were never here. You were always traveling, always busy with work. I let out a bitter laugh. And why was I busy, Miguel? Because I was the one paying for our damn house while you sat at home doing nothing. He said nothing. You want to know the most ironic part? I continued. I took that job because I thought we were building something together. I made sacrifices thinking it was for a greater good. But while I was working myself to exhaustion, you were screwing my best friend. He looked at me, desperate. I know I messed up, Anna, but can't we fix this another way? I leaned forward, staring directly into his eyes. We are fixing it. My lawyer has already filed for divorce. You won't get a cent from me. And as for that child, I hope you're a good father because I want you out of my life. Anna, please. It's over, Miguel. I stood up and walked away without looking back. It didn't take long for the news to spread. My real friends, the ones who hadn't betrayed me, stood by my side. And my family? Oh, they tried to reach out. My mother called me multiple times, trying to justify everything. We didn't want to hurt you, sweetheart. It was complicated for all of us. You need to forgive. Forgive? No. I moved on. Over time, I rebuilt my life. I left that hotel and bought myself a new apartment. I focused on my career, my future. And Miguel, well, he soon realized that life wasn't so easy without the comfort I had provided. A few weeks later, I received another message. Can we talk? I miss you. I laughed, deleted the message without replying, and for the first time in a long time I felt free. When I finally received confirmation that Miguel had been officially served with the divorce papers, I knew his real nightmare was just beginning. He tried to contact me in every way possible. He called me dozens of times a day, sent endless messages, even showed up at places he knew I frequented. But I didn't answer. I didn't give him a chance. I refused to let him manipulate me. One night, as I was returning to my apartment, I found my mother waiting outside. Anna, we need to talk. I rolled my eyes. I already knew exactly what this was about. We have nothing to talk about. Miguel is desperate. You're taking everything from him? She said, outraged, as if I were the villain in this story. I crossed my arms. Oh, now he's the victim? Honey, he made a mistake. But that doesn't mean you should ruin his life. I let out a humorless laugh. He ruined my life, Mom. He cheated on me, got my best friend pregnant, and all of you covered for them. And now you have the nerve to tell me that I'm being cruel. She sighed, reaching for my hand, but I pulled away. What you're doing to him, this isn't right, Anna. Anger burned in my chest. Oh, you want to talk about what's right? Was it right for me to pay for the mortgage alone while he was screwing my best friend? Was it right that I worked my ass off while he played the perfect husband? Now he gets to deal with the consequences. She looked at me like I was a monster. He has nowhere to go. I shrugged. Not my problem. She shook her head in disbelief. I didn't raise you to be this way, Anna. And I didn't expect my own mother to take the side of a cheating bastard. I turned around and walked into my building without looking back. Days passed, and Miguel's situation only got worse. Since I was the one who had paid for everything, he was now drowning in bills. The mortgage payments were overdue, and without my money to cover them, he quickly spiraled into financial ruin. Then came the eviction. I knew it was coming. When I received confirmation that he had failed to make any payments, I made sure to personally be there to witness the moment he was forced out of my house. When I arrived, the place was in chaos. Boxes were scattered around the front yard. Miguel was arguing with the officer handling the eviction. Carmen stood beside him, clutching her pregnant belly with a panicked expression. "Anna!" he shouted when he saw me. "You can't do this to me." I crossed my arms, feeling a dark sense of satisfaction bloom inside me. I can, and I did. This isn't fair. I lived in this house. No, I paid for this house. You were just a parasite living in it. His face turned red with frustration. Where the hell do you expect me to go? I shrugged. Not my problem. Carmen looked at me as if expecting mercy. Anna, please, please. She actually had the nerve to look me in the eyes and say, please. I took a step toward her. Oh, so now you can say my name? Before it was just, I hope she never finds out. Wasn't it? She lowered her head. It wasn't supposed to be like this. But it is. And now you and Miguel have to deal with it. Miguel ran his hands over his face, looking exhausted. You don't have a heart. I tilted my head. Funny. Because you sure loved that heart when it was paying all your bills. He opened his mouth to argue but shut it again. The officer approached. Time's up. You need to vacate the property now. Miguel's expression turned to sheer panic. He looked around, realizing that he was out of options. He grabbed a box and slammed it onto the ground. You just want to see me destroyed, don't you? I leaned in closer, meeting his gaze without a trace of pity. Yes. He clenched his jaw and stormed away, Carmen trailing after him. I stood there, watching as he left. Broke, homeless, and powerless. In the following days, my entire family turned against me. My aunts called me, my mother showed up at my apartment again. Even my father, who usually stayed out of things, tried to intervene. Anna, he's sleeping on your mother-in-law's couch. Don't you think this has gone too far? No, Dad, I don't. Carmen is pregnant. They have nothing. Great. Then Miguel can finally do what he should have done a long time ago. Get a job. My mother threw her hands up, exasperated. You're obsessed with revenge. And you're obsessed with protecting a cheater. They couldn't change my mind. And Miguel? Oh, Miguel was in ruins. No home, no comfort, no access to the money he had leached off me for years. I heard through some mutual friends that he had started taking odd jobs to make ends meet, but it wasn't enough. And then the inevitable happened. Miguel showed up at my apartment. He looked miserable, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. Anna, please. I have nothing left. I stared at him. I know. I need help. I tilted my head, pretending to think. Like I needed help when I found out you were cheating on me? He closed his eyes, frustrated. I was an idiot. I know that, but I can't change the past. I crossed my arms. No, but you sure as hell can suffer in the present. His hands clenched into fists as he swallowed his pride. You don't have to be this cruel. Oh, but I do. I learned from the best. And with that, I slammed the door in his face. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. Miguel was finally experiencing what life was like without me. And me? I was finally free. Time passed, and just as I had predicted, Miguel sank even deeper. No home, no money, no comfort. He had gone from a spoiled, dependent husband to a desperate man hopping from job to job just to keep himself afloat. And me? I moved on. I didn't feel sorry for him. In fact, every time I heard about another disaster in his life, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. It was a sweet taste of justice, of knowing that everything he had done to me was coming back to him. And then I heard the best news I had received in months. Carmen filed for divorce. I found out through an acquaintance, one of the few people who still dared to talk to me after everything that had happened. She ran into me at a cafe, hesitated for a moment, then smiled slightly before dropping the bombshell. She left him. I blinked. What? Carmen? She filed for divorce, and she wants alimony. The laugh escaped before I could stop it. A loud, genuine, from-the-gut laugh. Are you serious? I asked, still laughing. Dead serious. Miguel can't hold a stable job, and she doesn't want to be the one supporting him. Oh, the irony was delicious. Carmen, the woman who had sworn Miguel was her one true love, the one who clung to him like a parasite while I worked to pay for everything, had now done to him exactly what he did to me. Left him when he was no longer useful. And she wants alimony? I asked, still grinning. Yeah. She claims he promised to take care of her. And now that she has a baby, she needs financial support. I couldn't stop laughing. Please tell me, does Miguel even have money to pay her? My acquaintance smirked. No, and I lost it. Miguel hadn't just lost everything I had given him. Now even the woman he betrayed me for was financially screwing him over. Karma had come for him, and this time, he had no one left to leech off of. I have to see this. The following week, I made sure to accidentally show up at a place I knew Miguel still frequented. A rundown bar we used to go to, one of the only places he could still afford. He was sitting at the counter, looking like a ghost of his former self. Thinner, dark circles under his eyes, his beard unkempt, and of course, a cheap beer in his hand. I walked in slowly, taking my time, and sat 2 seats away. He noticed me immediately, his face tightening. What do you want? He muttered, his voice rough and tired. Nothing, I said, picking up my own drink. Just enjoying the view. He sighed heavily. Are you happy now? I took a sip, savoring the moment. Yes, very. He scoffed, shaking his head. You think this is funny? Miguel, I think this is hilarious. You threw our marriage away for Carmen, and look at you now. She left you. She took whatever little you had left. He ran a hand over his face, clearly exhausted. You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. Tell me, how did your great love fall apart so quickly? He went quiet for a long moment before staring at his empty glass. She said she couldn't be with someone who had nothing to offer. Funny, right? That's exactly what you said about me. He shut his eyes, his jaw tightening. You don't get it, Anna. Oh, but I do. You were only good enough for her when you were convenient. Now that you can't provide the comfortable life she wanted, she threw you away like garbage. He didn't argue because he couldn't. I stood up, ready to leave. You know what's the best part? You deserve every bit of this. And I walked out, leaving Miguel to drown in his own misery. After that day, I cut off everyone connected to my past. I distanced myself from my family. The hypocritical aunts who kept telling me to forgive. My mother who insisted I had gone too far. I owed nothing to any of them. The only person I owed something to was myself. And so I started over. I rebuilt my life from scratch, bought myself a new apartment just for me, sold everything that reminded me of that pathetic chapter of my life, donated some things, burned others. Miguel and Carmen were erased. I went out more, met new people, enjoyed life without carrying dead weight on my back. For the first time in years, my life was mine. And while I moved forward, Miguel kept falling apart. Months later, I heard that he had tried to appeal the divorce ruling, claiming that he deserved alimony instead. Of course, the judge laughed in his face and denied everything. I also found out that Carmen kept draining whatever tiny bit of money he had left. And me? I had never felt better. The world was finally how it should be. I was free, and Miguel was getting exactly what he deserved. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My name's Evan. I'm 29, and I never thought I'd be the type to write one of these posts. But what happened over the past few months has been gnawing at me. And I guess I just need to tell someone who doesn't know me. The moment that set everything in motion started on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I had just finished a call with a client and tossed my phone onto the counter when it started ringing again. Dad. He doesn't usually call in the middle of the day, so I answered. But before I could even say hello, I realized he must not have heard the click when I picked up. There was laughter on the other end, and then his voice, casual but cutting in a way only family can be. He'll never amount to anything. Just a loser living off our name. I froze. Felt like someone had reached through the phone and squeezed my lungs. Then another voice, my mom's, soft and amused, chimed in. At least he's useful enough to watch the house while we're gone. More laughter. Then the sound of ice clinking in a glass and my dad's voice again. Yeah, he should be grateful. We could have just rented the place out. He's lucky we even trust him. I didn't hang up right away. I just stood there listening, my stomach turning into a cold, solid knot. I don't know how long I stayed like that before I quietly pressed the red button on the screen and set the phone down like it had burned me. For a while, I just paced around the living room of the very house they were talking about. My house. Well, technically, I'd bought it 2 years ago with my own money, a place I was proud of because I worked hard to afford it. My parents had been so excited when I told them I was closing on it. At the time, I thought it was genuine pride. I'd invited them to stay with me whenever they wanted, and they took me up on that. They'd been using my house as a kind of base whenever they flew back from their long trips abroad. First, I liked it. I liked being the good son, the one they could rely on. I told myself that letting them stay here was just my way of giving back for everything they did for me growing up. But as the months passed, I realized their stays were getting longer and more frequent. My pantry would be half empty when they left. My utilities were higher than ever. And every time I mentioned splitting costs, Dad would chuckle and say, "We raised you. You can handle a few bills." I always swallowed my irritation. I didn't want to seem ungrateful, but hearing him say those words, just a loser living off our name, flipped a switch I didn't know existed. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the floor until the sun came up. I replayed every conversation, every little jab they'd made in passing. The time Dad laughed when I told him I was stressed about my mortgage and said, "If you can't handle this, maybe you shouldn't own a house." The time Mom told me I should be more like my brother who always makes the smart moves, even though he still lives rent-free in their old house. The next day when I got a text from Mom saying they'd extended their Europe trip another week and, "Hope you're keeping the place nice for us." Something inside me went cold and calm at the same time. For the next few days, I went about my routine like normal, but my mind was spinning quietly behind the scenes. I started pulling documents, looking through files, checking what I owned outright and what was still under financing. I called my realtor just to ask about the market. And when she told me houses in my neighborhood were selling in under 2 weeks for insane prices, I felt my chest tighten with a strange mix of fear and excitement. I didn't tell anyone what I was thinking. Not my brother, not my friends. I kept smiling through our family group chat, sending pictures of the dog, answering questions about the house like nothing was wrong. But every night, I stayed up late, cleaning out closets, going through boxes, donating what I didn't need. Each day, the house got a little emptier, and each day I felt a little lighter and a little more like I was doing something dangerous. Then one night, I found myself standing in the middle of my living room, looking around at the space that had been my home, my refuge, and my burden, and I made my decision. I called my realtor back the next morning and said the words I didn't think I'd say so soon. "Let's list it." By the end of the week, the for sale sign was in my yard. I kept it all secret. Every time my parents called from Europe, I made sure the background behind me looked the same. I made up stories about how quiet things were here, how nice it was to have the place to myself. All the while, I was signing papers, fielding offers, and packing up my life into a storage unit. When I accepted an offer, nearly $980,000, more than I'd even hoped for, I didn't feel relief. Not yet. I felt this slow building current of something like power humming just under my skin. I moved out a few days before the closing date. The house was nearly bare when I left. Just a few light fixtures and curtains left behind for the new owners. On the kitchen counter, I left one thing. A folded piece of paper with 6 words scrolled across it in black marker. The last night before I handed over the keys, I sat in my car outside the empty house and just stared at it. I imagined my parents coming back from Europe, dragging their suitcases up the driveway, laughing like they always do, expecting everything to be the way they left it. And then I imagined their faces when the key didn't turn. I don't know why that thought made me smile, but it did. I didn't know then just how intense their reaction would be or how far they'd go once they realized what I'd done. When the day finally came, I was hundreds of miles away, sitting in a quiet coffee shop with my laptop open and my phone face down. The house had officially closed the day before. The keys were no longer mine. The only thing that was still mine was the note I left behind, waiting like a fuse, ready to be lit. I didn't have to wait long. At 3:17 p.m., my phone started buzzing. First mom, then dad, then mom again. A string of calls, one after the other, relentless until I switched the phone to silent. Then came the texts. First polite, then confused, then angry. Evan, what is going on? The key isn't working. The house is empty. Empty? Where are you? You better have an explanation. Call us now. I didn't answer. I just sat there sipping my coffee, watching the messages roll in like waves during a storm. There was something almost surreal about it, like I was watching a movie about someone else's life. Then came the photo. It was a picture of my kitchen counter. And there it was, the note I'd left behind, the one with 6 words written in sharp black marker. The family loser did this. No one texted for about 20 minutes after that. I imagined them just standing there in the empty house trying to process what they were looking at. When Dad finally called again, I let it go to voicemail. I didn't listen to it until much later that night when I was alone in my new apartment. His voice was low, tight, and angrier than I'd ever heard it. You had no right to do this. We trusted you. You just humiliated this family. Do you have any idea what this looks like? Call me back immediately. I didn't call back. Instead, I went for a long walk through the quiet streets of my new neighborhood. I kept thinking about that word, humiliated. For years, I twisted myself into knots, trying to avoid doing exactly that to them. I'd bitten my tongue when they belittled me, smiled when they took advantage of my space, nodded and agreed when they told me how I should be living my life. But the truth was, humiliation had been my shadow for years. I just hadn't realized it until I finally stepped out from under it. When I got back to my apartment, there were already voicemails from my brother, too. His were different, calmer, but sharper in a way that cut even deeper. What are you doing, Evan? Mom's been crying all night. Dad's furious. You can't just sell the house out from under them. They needed a place to stay. You're being selfish. Selfish? That word used to sting. Now it just made me tired. The next day, Mom finally got through to me. I let the phone ring twice before answering, bracing myself. Evan, she said, her voice quivering. How could you do this to us after everything we've done for you? Something inside me snapped quietly, not loudly like an explosion, but like a rope that had finally frayed all the way through. You mean after everything I've done for you? I said, my voice steady. I let you live there for free. I took care of everything while you were gone, and you called me a loser for it. There was silence on the other end. Then she said, almost whispering, you weren't supposed to hear that. I did, I said, and I'm done pretending I didn't. She started crying again, saying things like, we didn't mean it, and your father was just joking, but every word just sounded like noise now. When I hung up, I realized my hands were shaking, not from anger this time, but from something else. Relief, maybe. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying the look I imagined on their faces when they realized the house was gone. The way they must have stood in that empty living room staring at the note. But the more I pictured it, the more I realized this wasn't over. They weren't just going to let this go. And I was right. Over the next week, the calls didn't stop. If anything, they got worse. Dad started leaving long, furious voicemails about family loyalty and respect. Mom sent texts saying they were thinking of taking legal action, though I knew they couldn't. I had done everything by the book. But what got to me wasn't the anger. It was how quickly the narrative flipped. Suddenly, I wasn't the good son anymore. I was the traitor, the one who betrayed them. And that's when I realized something important. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to play by their script anymore. I started ignoring every call, every message. I changed my number. I stopped checking the family group chat entirely. I thought they might back down after a while. I was wrong. One morning, I woke up to find a letter slid under my apartment door. No stamp, no envelope, just a single piece of paper with my dad's handwriting. It said, "You can't run from your family forever." That was the moment I knew this was going to escalate, and that if I didn't take control, they were going to try to pull me back in by force. A week later, it happened. I had just come back from a late evening run, earbuds still in, when I saw a familiar car parked across the street from my apartment building. My stomach dropped. It was Dad's. I almost turned around right there, but before I could react, the driver's door opened and he stepped out. Even from a distance, I could see the tightness in his jaw, the way his hands were balled into fists. "Evan." His voice cut through the quiet street, sharp enough to make a couple walking their dog turn their heads. "We need to talk." I didn't move. My heart was hammering, but at the same time, I felt a strange calm wash over me. I'd been waiting for this, hadn't I? Talk about what? I called back, my voice steadier than I expected. "You know what?" he said, walking toward me. "You think you can just disappear, sell the house, cut us off like we're strangers? You think that's how family works?" I glanced up at the windows of my building. A few lights were on. My neighbors might have been watching. For once, I didn't care. "I didn't cut you off," I said, taking a step toward him. "You did that the second you called me a loser and laughed about it behind my back." He stopped walking just a few feet away from me now. His face was flushed, and there was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not just anger, but panic. "You're overreacting," he said finally, his voice lower now, but no less intense. "You sold the house we all loved. Do you understand how humiliating this has been for us? People are asking questions. What are we supposed to tell them?" I let out a bitter laugh before I could stop myself. "You mean your friends? The ones you bragged to about the house I paid for?" His jaw clenched. "Watch your tone." There it was. That old phrase he used to throw at me growing up anytime I dared to push back. But this time, instead of making me shrink, it just made me stand taller. "No," I said quietly but firmly. "You don't get to talk to me like that anymore. You don't get to use my house, my money, my life as props to make yourself look good, and then call me worthless when I'm not around." For a moment, he just stared at me. I think he expected me to back down, to apologize like I always used to, but I didn't move. When he finally spoke, his voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. "This isn't over. You owe us an explanation. You owe this family something for what you've done." I shook my head slowly. "No, I don't owe you anything." His face went red, and for a second, I thought he might actually shout. But then he just turned on his heel and walked back to the car. He didn't slam the door, didn't peel away. He just sat there for a minute, engine running, before finally driving off. I stood there on the sidewalk long after the taillights disappeared, my chest tight. Part of me felt like I just won something. Another part of me felt like I just declared war. The next morning, I woke up to a text from my brother. "Dad's furious. Mom hasn't stopped crying. They said they're coming back tomorrow with the rest of the family. You need to be there when they arrive." I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back just 2 words. Not happening. But deep down, I knew this wasn't going to end with a few texts and an argument in the street. If they were planning to come here to force some kind of family meeting, then I needed to be ready. I spent the rest of the day thinking about every possible way this could go. I could ignore them. Sure, but I knew them well enough to know that would just make them push harder. By nightfall, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to hide. The next day, I made sure to get home early. I sat in my apartment with the door locked, blinds drawn, waiting for the inevitable knock. When it finally came, 3 sharp raps like a gavel, my stomach clenched, but I didn't move from the chair by the window. "Evan?" Mom's voice called through the door, muffled, but pleading. "Please open up. We just want to talk." I stayed silent. A moment later, Dad's voice came, harder, louder. You can't ignore us forever. You're going to face this family whether you like it or not. I stood, walked slowly to the door, and put my hand on the knob. My heart was racing, but I wasn't scared this time. I was ready. I opened the door, and there they were. Mom, Dad, my brother, and even my aunt and uncle standing behind them like backup. The whole family gathered in my hallway like some kind of tribunal. No one said anything at first. We just stood there staring at each other. Then Dad stepped forward. "You're going to explain yourself," he said, his voice low but dangerous. "Right now." I took a step back and gestured for them to come in. If this was going to happen, it was going to happen on my terms. They filed into my apartment one by one, the air heavy with tension. My mom clutched her purse like a shield. My brother kept his arms crossed like he was already siding with Dad. And my aunt and uncle stood stiffly near the wall, clearly there as witnesses more than anything else. "Sit," I said quietly, motioning to the couch and chairs. To my own surprise, they actually did. I stayed standing. Dad leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at me like I was a defendant in a courtroom. "We want to know why," he said finally. "Why you sold the house. Why you blindsided us. Why you've turned your back on this family." I let out a slow breath. "You really want to know why?" "Yes," Mom said softly, her eyes wet. "We deserve an explanation." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how absurd it sounded. "You deserve an explanation? After everything you've said about me? After calling me a loser when you thought I couldn't hear?" Mom flinched. Dad's jaw tightened. "That was a private conversation," he said, his voice sharp. "Exactly," I shot back. "And you didn't think I'd ever know how you really feel about me. But I do now, and it changes everything." My brother shifted uncomfortably. "Evan, come on. You're making a huge deal out of one comment. Dad jokes like that all the time." "One comment," I said, feeling my voice rise for the first time. "You think this is about one comment? This is about years of being treated like I'm less than. Years of being told to be grateful, to just smile and let you take what you want, my time, my space, my money. Because that's what a good son does. And I did it. I did it for years. But not anymore." My dad stood up now, towering over me, his face red. "You ungrateful little..." "Don't," I said, cutting him off. My voice was calm, but it had an edge that made him pause. "Don't go there. I am not ungrateful. I gave you everything I could. I let you live in that house for free. I took care of it when you were gone. I made sure it stayed nice so you'd have somewhere to come back to. And you still laughed at me behind my back. You called me a loser. Well, the loser sold the house. The loser moved on, and the loser is done being treated like dirt." For a moment, the room was completely silent. You could have heard the clock ticking in the kitchen. Mom started crying then, whispering things like, "We didn't mean it," and "You've misunderstood us." But Dad wasn't backing down. "You've embarrassed this family," he said through gritted teeth. "People are talking. Do you have any idea how this makes us look?" "Good," I said flatly. "Maybe they'll stop seeing me as your free handyman and start seeing me as my own person." My uncle finally spoke up, clearly trying to diffuse things. "Maybe everyone needs to calm down. There's still time to fix this." "No," I said, turning to face him. "There's nothing to fix. The house is sold. The money's mine, and none of you get a say in what I do with it." That's when my brother snapped. "You're being selfish, Evan. We all counted on that house. You knew Mom and Dad needed a place to stay when they came back. How could you just take that away?" "Because it was never their house," I said, my voice shaking now. "It was mine. Mine. And I'm allowed to choose who lives in it. I'm allowed to choose who I open my door to. And I'm allowed to close it when people use me and call me worthless when they think I can't hear." I felt something in my chest loosen as the words came out, like I'd been holding my breath for years and was finally letting it go. Dad just stared at me, his face unreadable now. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he said, "If you walk away from this family, don't expect us to be there for you when you come crawling back." I smiled, then really smiled for the first time in weeks. "That's the difference between us," I said quietly. I don't need you to be there. I'm not crawling anywhere. I walked to the door and held it open. We're done here. No one moved at first. Then Mom stood, tears streaming down her face, and walked past me without saying a word. My aunt and uncle followed, looking uncomfortable. My brother glared at me but didn't speak. Dad was the last one to leave. He paused in the doorway, staring at me like he was memorizing my face. "You'll regret this," he said finally. "Maybe," I replied, "but at least the decision will be mine." And then he was gone. I stood there for a long time after the door shut, listening to their footsteps fade down the hall. My apartment felt impossibly quiet, but not in a lonely way, in a peaceful way. Over the next few weeks, the calls stopped. The texts stopped. Even the passive-aggressive posts on social media about disrespectful children stopped. It was like they'd all agreed to go silent at once. At first, I thought the silence would hurt, but instead, it felt like healing. I settled into my new place, started a new routine, and slowly realized how much lighter life felt without that constant weight of expectation pressing on me. And then one afternoon, I got an email from my realtor, a simple one-line message that said, "Your funds have cleared." I stared at the number in my account, the result of selling that house. And for the first time, I felt completely free. I didn't buy another house right away. I traveled. I took a trip to Italy, something I'd always wanted to do, but never felt I could justify. I started saying yes to things I used to put off because I was worried about being responsible for everyone else. Months later, I heard through a cousin that my parents had rented a small condo whenever they came back to town now, and that Dad was still bitter about the stunt I pulled. But I didn't feel guilt anymore because it wasn't a stunt. It was me finally choosing myself. And that note I left on the counter, that was the truest thing I'd ever written. The family loser did this. Now on to the next story. Story 6. My name's Eric. I'm 28. And this story starts on a Christmas morning that still echoes in my head like a song you don't want to hear but can't stop playing. I've never been one to expect much during the holidays. Not because I didn't care, but because I learned early that expectations in my family were often just invitations to disappointment. We weren't poor, not rich either, but my parents always had enough for the people they liked. And for the past few years, that person hasn't been me. This year was no different. The living room smelled like cinnamon candles and the artificial pine tree we reused every year. My mom loved appearances. She made sure the garland was fluffed, the lights were warm-toned, and the cocoa mugs all matched. The gift pile under the tree looked impressive. Neatly wrapped boxes with gold ribbon and tags written in her slanted cursive. Everyone was there. My sister Danielle and her husband Jason, my dad's sister Aunt Carla, even my little cousin Noah in his itchy Christmas sweater. I was sitting on the arm of the couch, watching everyone unwrap their gifts, smiling like I belonged. And then the pattern emerged. Each person opened a gift, smiled, and read the handwritten note out loud. They were long, sentimental, thoughtful. To my darling Danielle, thank you for always being my rock. My mom wrote on hers. Jason got one that thanked him for being the man we always dreamed of for our daughter. My dad's note from her mentioned their unbreakable team, and even Aunt Carla had one thanking her for being a second mother when things were tough. And then it was my turn. I looked for a box, a bag, even an envelope. Nothing. The laughter quieted a little when people realized I hadn't opened anything. Danielle looked at me awkwardly, then back at her watch. I finally asked gently but clearly, "Hey, is there something I'm supposed to be opening?" Mom didn't look up from her mug. She stirred it like the cocoa had offended her. "No," she said, "because you've given us nothing this year, not even respect." The silence that followed wasn't loud. It was sharp like a needle breaking skin. My dad didn't say a word. Danielle bit her lip like she wanted to say something, but was afraid to speak. My cousin Noah looked between all of us like he didn't quite get it, but knew something was very, very wrong. I just nodded. No protest, no rebuttal. I felt this weird stillness come over me. Not numbness exactly, but something quieter than anger, deeper than hurt. I stood up and walked upstairs. I didn't slam the door, didn't stomp, just moved. There was a box under my bed, a heavy one, taped and sealed for years. I had thought about getting rid of it more times than I could count, but something always stopped me. Some stubborn little part of me that refused to pretend none of it mattered. I came back down holding the box. My dad blinked when he saw it. My mom's fingers froze mid-stir. Danielle's eyes went wide like she knew exactly what it was. Aunt Carla shifted uncomfortably in her chair, and I caught the way her jaw tightened. I didn't say anything. I just set the box down on the coffee table and took a step back. Danielle was the first to speak. "Eric, is that what I think it is?" I didn't answer. My dad reached forward slowly like the box might burn him. He peeled the tape back like it was lined with glass. Inside were stacks of envelopes, a few old camcorder tapes, and one manila folder with a bent corner. His face changed completely. He went pale, and I mean ghost pale, the kind of pale that makes people reach for aspirin. My mom leaned over, saw what was inside, and her whole expression collapsed. She blinked fast like she was trying to reset the moment. You didn't really keep that," she whispered. Danielle reached for one of the envelopes. Her fingers trembled. "Is this from that year?" I finally spoke. "It's from all the years. Every single one." Aunt Carla's voice was low, like someone trying not to be overheard. "You said you destroyed those. You promised you'd never use them." I laughed once. Not because it was funny, but because it was ridiculous how quickly the roles flipped. 30 minutes ago, I was the ungrateful son, the failure, the disrespectful one. Now they were staring at a box they all wished had disappeared, and I was just standing there, silent. Danielle pulled out one of the tapes. She read the label. Her voice cracked. Christmas 2005. Mom yelling. Dad threatening. "Don't." My mom snapped a little too loud. This is not the time." "It's exactly the time," I said. "You made this morning about respect. Let's talk about what that actually means." My dad closed the box fast. "This doesn't need to go any further." I took a breath, steady. "No, it needs to go exactly as far as it has to." The room was dead silent now. Not even Noah fidgeted. Aunt Carla stared at me. "You're not really going to use that, are you?" I looked her straight in the eye, and that's when Danielle stood up. Danielle stood slowly, holding the tape in her hand like it weighed 10 pounds. Her voice was soft, but it sliced through the room like a razor. "I remember this Christmas. I was 10. I couldn't sleep, so I came downstairs. I heard yelling. Mom, you were screaming. Dad, you threw a chair. And then the next morning, you smiled for the camera like nothing happened. You handed us gifts like we were the Brady Bunch." She looked down at the tape. "I thought I dreamed it. I told myself for years it couldn't have been real, but you filmed it." "You filmed it, Eric?" I nodded once. "I didn't mean to at first. I had that old camcorder Grandpa gave me, remember? I used to record everything. That night, I left it running by accident. Later, I watched it back and I just kept it." My mom's voice was shrill now, defensive. "You were a child. You didn't understand what was going on. We were under pressure, financial stress, emotional. You called me a mistake," I said flatly. "You told Dad you wished you'd never had a second kid, that it ruined your body and your life. Then you both joked about sending me to live with Aunt Carla." She flinched like I'd slapped her. Danielle sat back down, holding the tape like it might break. Her husband Jason leaned forward, clearly trying to make sense of the mess he'd just been pulled into. "Wait," he said slowly. "You're telling me you recorded proof of all this abuse, and your family just ignored it?" "They didn't ignore it," I said. "They pretended it didn't happen, which honestly is worse." My dad finally spoke. His voice was measured, rehearsed. "Eric, we've made mistakes, but we've moved past them. This is not the way to handle." I cut him off. "You moved past them. I carried them." His jaw clenched. "You're holding on to ancient history. Digging up the past for what? Pity? Revenge?" I stepped closer to the table. "No, just the truth." My mom stood too, her face flushed red now. "You think this makes you righteous? Keeping old tapes like some deranged archivist. You're not a martyr, Eric. You're just bitter. You think bringing up the past is going to fix anything? All you're doing is hurting your family." I looked around the room. You're right. I am hurting my family, but not because of what I did today. Because of what you did and how you forced me to carry it in silence for 2 decades. No one moved. Aunt Carla looked like she wanted to shrink into the couch. My mom turned to Danielle almost desperately. Tell him to stop this. Tell him this is wrong. Danielle shook her head slowly. I can't because he's right. We all just let it happen. We let the damage sit there like mold in the walls. We painted over it every Christmas and hoped no one noticed the smell. Jason put a hand on her shoulder. What's in the folder? He asked, nodding toward the manila envelope. I picked it up, opened it, and slid the contents onto the coffee table. Photocopies of journal pages, therapy notes, even one hospital intake form from when I was 16. My mom gasped, recognizing the letterhead. I thought you said you were in a car accident, she whispered. I didn't answer. Danielle stared at the pages. You went to the ER that night. Concussion, bruised ribs, said I fell down the stairs. I didn't. Dad shoved me into the door frame. No, my dad said sharply. That's not true. You tripped. You were running down the hall. I was hiding, I said, and suddenly the energy shifted. No more performances. No more cocoa and candles and wrapping paper illusions. The walls weren't just cracking. They were crumbling. Aunt Carla put a hand over her mouth. You kept all of this for years, I said, because I knew this day would come. The day you try to erase me for not fitting your perfect holiday photo. My mom was trembling now. What do you want from us? An apology? Is that it? I didn't answer because honestly, I didn't know what I wanted. For so long, I just wanted them to see me. Then I wanted them to hurt like I did. Then I wanted to disappear entirely. And now I wasn't sure anymore. But I knew this the moment I brought that box downstairs. I wasn't the quiet, overlooked one anymore. I was the mirror they couldn't avoid. The one that showed every crack they tried to hide. Danielle reached for another tape, turning it over slowly in her hand. You were alone in this house for so long, she said quietly. And none of us even asked what that did to you. The fire in the fireplace crackled. My dad sat down again, his face unreadable. Then Aunt Carla looked up at me. Her eyes were sharp, suspicious, almost afraid. What are you planning to do with all of this? I met her gaze and said nothing, because that's when my phone buzzed on the table. Everyone looked at it. A new message from a number none of them recognized. I read it, smiled, and slid the phone across the table to my dad. He picked it up, read it, and his hand started to shake. Danielle leaned over his shoulder and read it, too. Then she looked at me, stunned. Eric, she whispered. What did you do? And I just stood there, silent, waiting. My dad's fingers tightened around the phone like he wanted to crush it in his palm. His eyes darted from the screen to me, then back again. He opened his mouth once, closed it, tried again. You sent this to them? His voice cracked on the last word. He sounded smaller than I'd ever heard him. Not angry, not furious, scared. I didn't flinch. I did. Danielle grabbed the phone before he could lock the screen. Her eyes scanned it quickly, and then her whole face shifted, her usual calm cracking into disbelief. You contacted a lawyer? Aunt Carla straightened in her seat. What lawyer? Danielle read aloud, voice trembling. Confirming receipt of all materials for case review. Emotional neglect, physical abuse, financial exploitation, as discussed, will begin processing before the holiday break. Please save copies of all original evidence. Signed, Evelyn Pratt, Family Advocacy and Civil Litigation. The room went still. No coughs, no whispers, just stunned, suffocating silence. My mom stepped forward, but she wasn't walking. She was lunging. You can't do this. You wouldn't. Eric, we're your parents. We raised you. I looked at her, really looked at her. No, you tolerated me. You raised Danielle. You survived me. There's a difference. She actually recoiled like the words hit her physically. My dad finally found his voice again, quieter, hoarser. This will destroy us. Do you understand that? You'll ruin the family. I didn't ruin anything, I said. I just stopped letting you pretend you didn't. Jason, still holding the tape in his lap, looked between all of us. Wait, he said slowly, trying to process this. This is a legal case? I nodded. It's a review for now. Civil, but depending on what they find in the records, and if my statements line up with the documentation. I trailed off, letting the weight of that silence speak for itself. Danielle leaned forward, her elbows on her knees, still pale. You could have told me, she said quietly. I tried, I replied just as quietly. When we were kids, you always said I was too dramatic, that I was making things up. She closed her eyes. I was 12, Eric. I didn't know better. I nodded. I know that now. Aunt Carla looked like she was trying to piece it all together in her head. What exactly did you send them? Just the tapes. I opened the folder again and fanned out across the table. Therapy notes, journal entries, some recorded voicemails, and a letter I wrote the night I almost left for good. Danielle flinched. You mean when you ran away? I didn't get far, I said. You remember the night differently than I do. You remember me being emotional and manipulative. I remember sleeping behind a gas station because I was too scared to go back. Jason looked up at that, alarmed. You ran away and they didn't call the police? They said I was seeking attention, I said, and grounded me when I came home. That part landed harder than I expected. Danielle buried her face in her hands. Jason looked sick. My mom finally collapsed onto the couch, still shaking her head. So what happens now? You're going to parade our mistakes in front of strangers. Let lawyers pick through our lives like a crime scene. I didn't answer right away. I looked around at the room. The garland, the tree, the half-opened presents, the half-eaten cookies. It looked like any other family Christmas. But beneath it, rot. I didn't want to do this, I said, voice steady. But this morning made it clear. You still think you've done nothing wrong. You punished me for existing, for not being what you wanted, and now you're shocked I finally pushed back. But what will they do with it? My dad asked. The firm. Well, they come after us? They'll do what they're legally allowed to do, I said. Maybe it's a public record. Maybe it's compensation. Maybe it's nothing. But they'll see everything. Aunt Carla looked like she might be sick. You're tearing this family apart. No, I said. I'm finally showing it for what it is. Danielle's voice broke through the air again, this time softer, like a crack in glass. What happens to me? Am I part of this? I turned to her gently. No, not unless you want to be. I know you were young. I know you didn't mean to look away. But if you want the truth, I'm not doing this to punish anyone anymore. I'm doing it because I deserve peace. Jason cleared his throat. You still could have just walked away. Cut ties. Why now? Why like this? I looked him in the eye. Because I've tried walking away, and they always pull me back in for holidays, obligations, appearances, and this morning proved they still see me as less. That's not distance, that's control. Jason nodded slowly. Danielle wiped her face. And then, for the first time that morning, my dad looked defeated. His eyes dropped to the floor. He didn't say anything. My mom didn't either. That was the first time I realized they had no idea how to respond. Not because they were sorry, but because they'd lost their grip. Then the doorbell rang. It was still morning, barely past 10. Everyone looked up, confused. No one moved. Another chime. 3 seconds later, a loud knock. My mom turned to me, eyes narrowed, suspicious. Did you? I didn't respond because I already knew who it was. And the second the door opened, everything would change. But I stayed standing and waited. Danielle stood first, almost instinctively. She crossed to the door while the rest of the room stayed frozen like someone had paused time just before a car crash. The knock came again, harder this time. Danielle hesitated with her hand on the doorknob, glanced back at me for some kind of confirmation. I nodded once. She opened it. A woman in a long gray coat stepped inside, flanked by another in business casual attire, holding a slim briefcase. The woman in the coat offered a polite smile, but her presence carried authority. Eric Halverson? She asked. her voice calm but commanding. I stepped forward. That's me. She nodded. I'm Evelyn Pratt. This is my associate, Leah. We're here to formally collect the physical evidence you agreed to submit. She turned to the stunned living room full of my family and added, We'll be quick. My mom's face went pale. You're not serious. You brought them on Christmas. I shrugged. It's when they were available. I didn't think you'd be busy ignoring me again this year. Danielle looked between me and the two women like she was watching a reality show she couldn't turn off. You really went through with it. You didn't just say you were going to. Evelyn and Leah moved with practiced ease. They unpacked a small scanner, gloves, a form for signatures. I handed them the tapes, the folder, and my old camcorder, its scratched lens still intact. Evelyn cataloged everything with calm efficiency. My dad stood, anger bubbling beneath his surface like a kettle seconds from whistling. You could have talked to us. Worked this out quietly. You didn't have to humiliate us. No, I said evenly. I had to because the quiet is what let it happen in the first place. Evelyn didn't even glance up as she spoke. Mr. Halverson, if you have any questions about this process, we can schedule a time. Do you know what you're doing to this family? My mom cut in, voice trembling. You're poisoning it. No, Evelyn replied, still without looking at her. He's disinfecting it. The words hit like a slap. My mom took a step back, mouth slightly open, and sat down hard on the edge of the couch. Leah approached me and handed over a small form to sign. Consent for digital reproduction, she explained. We'll scan and archive these for the official report. Originals remain with you unless subpoenaed. I signed without hesitation. Danielle watched it all, slowly sitting back down beside Jason. Her voice was barely above a whisper. You were alone for so long and we just let it be like that. I finally turned to her. You were a kid, and later you just got used to how they treated me. Like I deserved less. Like I had earned the silence. She wiped her face. I didn't know how bad it was. I swear I didn't. I know, I said. But you could have asked. Evelyn finished packing everything up. We'll follow up in the next week. There are options for redress, civil damages, potential injunctions, even restorative mediation if the client's open to it. She turned to me. But that's your choice. Thank you, I said. As they left, Evelyn turned to my parents and said one final thing. You'll be contacted soon. I suggest you cooperate. Denial only delays the inevitable. The door closed behind them with a soft click. For a few seconds, no one spoke, just the low hum of the heater and the crackling fire. Then my mom stood again, slowly this time, like someone recovering from a fall. She looked at me, not through me, at me for the first time in years. You want to make us the villains? Fine, go ahead. But one day you'll regret this when you're older, when you're alone, when your kids do the same to you. I looked her straight in the eyes. If my kids ever do this to me, I'll know I failed them the way you failed me. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. And that was it. Danielle stood next. I think we should go, she said quietly, tugging at Jason's arm. We'll talk later, okay? Yeah, I said. And for the first time, there wasn't bitterness, just exhaustion. As they left, Aunt Carla followed behind, mumbling something about never coming back here again. My dad sat back down, stared into the fireplace, and said nothing. My mom went to the kitchen, rattling dishes just to make noise. I went to the stairs and paused. There, on the second step, was the same creak I remembered avoiding when sneaking around as a kid. It used to be my enemy, giving me away. Now it just felt like history beneath my feet. I packed that night quietly. No need to announce it. No need for a dramatic exit. I left a single note on the kitchen counter. You were right. I didn't give you anything this year, but I finally gave something to myself. I drove out of town before sunrise. The firm followed up in early January. They validated the contents, found corroborating evidence in my old medical records, and initiated a formal inquiry. There were consequences. Not public scandals, not tabloid drama, but quiet, sharp consequences. A restraining order, civil penalties, an investigation into how financial decisions were made in my name as a minor, especially regarding a closed savings account I'd never touched, but which mysteriously vanished in 2012. Danielle and I talked again, not immediately, but a few weeks later. She called. We met for lunch. It wasn't dramatic, just two people learning how to be siblings again. She apologized, genuinely said she wanted to do better. And for once, I believed her. My parents sent a letter. 6 pages. Half apology, half justification. I didn't reply. Some doors are better closed. And not every knock deserves an answer. I moved to a smaller town closer to the coast. Found work that gave me peace. Started therapy again. Real therapy. Not the stuff they once forced me into so I could be fixed. I didn't bring the tapes. Didn't need them anymore because I wasn't trying to prove anything. I already had. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was just surviving Christmas. I wasn't hoping for acknowledgement or bracing for shame. I was just living, which in the end was the greatest gift I could have given myself. And unlike the ones they used to hand out, this one actually meant something. Now on to the next story. Story 7. Dad threw his napkin down and yelled, "You're the problem. Not like your sister. She actually contributes." I laughed and said, "Then she can contribute to her own rent." Dad froze mid-breath. Mom dropped her fork. And sister. It was Christmas Eve and my dad had already had 2 glasses of wine before the ham even hit the table. My sister, Lauren, was halfway through her monologue about her recent promotion. Something that sounded more like a padded resume line than a real job move. But she spoke in that overly polished LinkedIn post tone she always used when she wanted to impress someone, usually our parents. She went on about how her boss called her irreplaceable, how her team looked up to her, how she was managing more projects than ever. I kept chewing my food, watching her spin her story while my parents nodded along like she just won the Nobel Peace Prize. Then she dropped the line that lit the match. Of course, it's a lot, but it's worth it. Especially when I'm able to help mom and dad. Not everyone my age thinks about family first. She smiled at me while she said it. Not directly, but it was meant for me. Every word of it. The implication wasn't subtle. It never was with Lauren. And my parents took the bait like they always did. My mom touched her hand gently like she was the family's savior. Dad chuckled, proud, and reached for another serving of potatoes. That's when he did it. He threw his napkin down. "You're the problem. Not like your sister. She actually contributes." I stopped, not in shock. I knew something like this was coming, but the timing, the nerve, that was what made me pause. I laughed once, then leaned back and said it plainly. "Then she can contribute to her own rent." My dad's mouth was still open mid-breath. My mom's fork clinked against her plate. Lauren looked like she had been caught stealing from a church donation box. No one said a word. I pulled out my phone, opened the banking app. There was a neat little string of rent payments, all for Lauren's building, all from my account. I turned the phone so they could all see. Didn't say a thing. Just let the numbers speak. My mom leaned in. She looked at the screen for longer than she probably needed to be sure. My dad started shaking his head before he even understood what he was seeing. And Lauren, she just stared. When she finally opened her mouth, I already knew she'd mess up. "That's not true. She's lying." She said it like it was instinct, like she'd used that line before, and it had always worked. But this time it didn't land. No one backed her up. I stood, grabbed my bag, didn't wait for the next denial. "I've been paying for your apartment for 11 months. You transferred it to me as a temporary emergency last January. Remember? I've got the texts. If we're pretending now." Lauren didn't say anything. I looked at my parents just once. "I'm done. She wants to be the provider. Let her." I walked out. No coat, no plan, just cold air and that kind of rage that doesn't burn. It freezes. By the time I got to my car, I had 6 missed calls. 2 from mom, 1 from dad, 3 from Lauren. I didn't answer a single one. I didn't go back to that house for days. And when I did, everything had already started to change, just not the way they hoped. For the next 2 weeks, Lauren's silence was louder than anything she'd ever said. She didn't call. Not at first, which was weird because Lauren loved to talk. especially when she needed to twist a story in her favor. Instead, she sent a carefully worded text the morning after Christmas like she was writing a company-wide apology email. "Hey, I hope you're okay. Things got out of hand. Let's not let emotions ruin the holidays." I stared at it for a minute before deleting it. No reply. She followed it up a few hours later with another one. "You misunderstood. I didn't mean to make it seem like I was taking credit. I was just trying to help." That was a lie, and she knew it. I'd sat there quietly every time she dropped hints to our parents that she was financially supporting them. I let it slide when she called me between jobs during a family dinner. Even though I had 2 clients on retainer and was paying for literally everything in her life. But what really got me, the part one kept thinking about, was how my parents looked at her, like she was carrying the family, like she was the adult, like I was just taking up space. That night, I went through my bank records, all of them. Rent, obviously, $1,850 a month, 11 months straight. Utilities in her name charged to my card. Amazon purchases I never made. Uber Eats orders to an address I didn't live at. $30 here, $40 there. It adds up fast. A Spotify family plan she didn't realize was still on my account. I even found a $280 Target order from 2 months ago that included a set of AirPods she swore she bought with her own bonus. I was the bonus. I sent her a Venmo request for everything. Every cent. I labeled each line item with the date and description like I was an accountant closing the books. $21,484.12 in total. She declined it within the hour. No message, just a red declined notice. That's when I blocked her. The next morning, I shut down every shared account we had, changed all the passwords, disconnected her devices, called the landlord, and removed my name from her lease. She'd have 30 days to fix it or move. Then I emailed her. Not text, email. She'd forced me into this so she could deal with it the official way. I'm done. No more payments. No more cover stories. No more pretending. I didn't hear back, but my phone started buzzing again. Not from her, from our parents. "Your sister said you're going through something. Do you want to come talk? We're worried, Mila. She said you're lashing out. She really didn't mean to hurt you." It was like watching a rerun of the same show I'd seen my whole life. Lauren causes chaos, lies about it, plays innocent, and they all gather around to protect her from the consequences. And I get cast as the unstable one for reacting. I ignored them. A week passed, then another. One Thursday night, I got home from work and saw her standing outside my building. No car, hoodie on, eyes red, hair pulled back like she hadn't washed it in days. She asked to come in just for a minute, just to talk. I told her no. She started crying right there on the sidewalk. She said she messed up, that she got in over her head, that she didn't know how to say no to mom and dad when they asked for things, so she let me pay, that she was going to fix it, that she'd pay me back. I asked her one question. If mom and dad had ever known it was my money? She didn't answer. That was all I needed. "You used me. You lied about it. You turned them against me. And now you want forgiveness because it's finally costing you something." She tried to grab my hand. I stepped back. "You made this mess. Clean it up yourself." Then I went inside and shut the door behind me. She didn't leave right away. I watched her from the window, pacing, sitting down on the curb, checking her phone, but eventually she did. What I didn't know at the time was that she had already defaulted on her next rent payment, that she was behind on her credit card, that mom and dad had just asked her to cover the property tax on their house, something she'd promised to handle with her raise. And the money she used for all of that was gone because the Real Bank had closed its doors. It started with a voicemail from my mom. One of those rushed, out-of-breath messages she leaves when she's either angry or afraid. "Mila, please call me back. It's urgent. It's about your sister." I didn't call back. I waited. 2 hours later, she called again. This time, I answered. She skipped straight to the point. "We got a letter from Lauren's landlord. She's being evicted." I didn't even flinch. I'd been expecting this moment. The only surprise was that it took this long. "She didn't tell you, though. She told us she was fine, that everything was handled. She said her new job was paying well." I let that hang in the air. My mom was already starting to connect the dots. You stopped helping her. That's right. The first week of January, I ended everything. No rent, no utilities, no food deliveries, no quiet bailouts. I wasn't doing another year of cleaning up her messes while she played the generous daughter. And now that the credit well had run dry, reality was finally showing up at her doorstep. And apparently now our parents. Mom's voice softened like she wanted to blame the universe for it. Not her. She said Lauren hadn't been herself, that she'd been staying in her room, not eating much, not talking. I didn't say what I was really thinking, that Lauren wasn't broken, she was just unmasked. She couldn't lie her way out this time because there was nothing left to borrow. No one left to blame. By the end of the week, she was out of her apartment, officially evicted. She didn't say anything to me. I found out through a neighbor she'd once made me help move. The kind of favor Lauren always expected and never returned. She left quietly. No moving truck, just a few suitcases and her car packed full. She showed up at our parents' place like she was taking a sabbatical. Told them it was temporary, that she just needed a break between leases. At first, they believed her, but then the mail started showing up. Final notices, closed accounts, unpaid bills in her name, all the things I used to intercept. Turns out Lauren hadn't just relied on me. She'd built her entire image on the foundation of me. And once I stepped away, the whole thing came down. My dad called next. That was rare. He usually left all emotional conversations to Mom. He didn't start with questions, just said he needed to come over. Both of them. He sounded like he'd already swallowed a bitter pill and wanted me to hear it from them before someone else did. They showed up with groceries and tight faces. No one said, "We're sorry," at first. They sat at my table like it was unfamiliar territory, like they were guests in a life they hadn't paid attention to until now. Then they told me everything. That Lauren confessed that the money wasn't hers. That the job she bragged about didn't exist the way she claimed. That she'd kept the lie going so long even she probably forgot where the truth ended. I asked them what changed, why they believed me now. "Because we saw what her life looks like without you," my dad said. "And it doesn't hold up." That part hit not because I needed the validation, I was past that, but because I realized it wasn't just Lauren who had lived off my support. My silence had enabled the whole illusion. I was part of it too, just from the other side. They apologized, both of them, not with dramatic speeches, but with quiet regret, with a look I hadn't seen on either of them in years. Not disappointment, but recognition. Later that night, I got a text from Lauren. Not an apology, just a sentence. "I know you hate me, but I'm still your sister." I didn't respond, not because I hated her, but because I finally understood that being sisters didn't mean I had to be her safety net. That was the last time she reached out for a while, and the first time I didn't feel obligated to chase her down. By early February, Lauren was living in our parents' house full-time, like a ghost of her former self wrapped in old habits. Her childhood bedroom was now her new headquarters, a place where she could hide behind closed doors and pretend like she was in control of something. But the illusion couldn't hold up much longer. Not without someone else's money to keep it alive. It started unraveling faster than I expected. The first crack came one morning when her car got repossessed right in front of the house. Our mom was the one who called me. Her voice caught somewhere between anger and shock. They just showed up with a tow truck and took it. She didn't say a word about being behind. She just stood there screaming like they'd made a mistake. There was no mistake. She hadn't made a single payment since October, something I only realized after I got the repo notice in my own mailbox. Turns out the lease had been in my name. Another thing she had conveniently never mentioned. My mom didn't know what to say after that. I think that was the first time she started to question who Lauren really was when no one was watching. Then came the credit card bills. One after another. Lauren had told our parents she was doing fine, that she had savings, that she'd just taken a break from work to refocus. But when the statements started showing up in their mailbox, it became clear she was drowning. She owed thousands, late fees on everything. And no one could explain how someone with a promotion and a new job had somehow missed every single payment for months. And then came the lie that changed everything. My dad showed up at my place without warning. No heads up, no text, just knocked on my door one rainy Tuesday evening. He was holding a thick manila envelope like he was serving me legal papers. He came in without much talk, just set the envelope on my table and asked me to look through it. Inside were pages of bank statements, emails, overdue notices, a few screenshots from Lauren's phone that my mom had apparently stumbled across while she was trying to help her get organized. I didn't need to read every line. I recognized most of it. All the payments I used to make, all the subscriptions she never canceled, all the bills I used to quietly settle. There were even a few I didn't know about. Apparently, Lauren had taken out a personal loan, used my name as a reference. She listed me as her employer. I sat back, stunned. Then my dad said it. She told us you threatened her. I blinked. Said you told her if she didn't leave the apartment quietly, you'd ruin her. That you'd tell everyone she was a fraud. That you were enjoying this. That you'd been waiting for her to fall. First I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so calculated. She didn't just shift the narrative. She rewrote it entirely. But my dad didn't look like someone who believed her. He pulled out his phone, said he needed me to hear something. Apparently, a few days earlier, Lauren had been on the phone with one of her friends talking on speaker in the kitchen. She didn't realize her phone had automatically connected to the house's Bluetooth speaker in the living room, right where our parents were sitting. He said, "I'm not worried. I can make them believe anything. I've been doing it for years. I'll just say Mila's trying to ruin me. They'll believe it. They always do." My dad hit pause. The room was dead silent. He doesn't know we heard it. Not yet. I looked at him this time. There was no defense in his eyes. No excuses. Just quiet shame. "I'm sorry, Mila, for not seeing it sooner." And then something I didn't expect. He started to cry. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quietly, like someone who had finally realized how badly he'd failed at protecting the wrong daughter. He left not long after, said they'd figure out what to do next. The next morning, I got a text from my mom. One line, "Dinner Sunday, all of us, please." And another 1 hour later, "It's time we fix this." I didn't respond right away. Something about that dinner felt heavier than any apology could fix. But I knew I'd go, not for Lauren, for myself, because it was time to hear face to face what they were finally ready to admit, and what Lauren couldn't hide from anymore. Dinner was scheduled for 6 o'clock. I showed up at 6:17. I wasn't trying to make a point, but I guess in a way I was. I sat in the car for nearly 10 minutes with the engine off, watching the porch light buzz and flicker like it had every winter. It had never been fixed, even though Lauren once bragged to our parents that she'd hired someone to handle it. I had paid for that guy, by the way, like always. I finally walked up, opened the door, and let myself in without knocking. No one said anything. It was like they were waiting for me to decide whether this night was going to explode or not. The dining table was set too perfectly. Matching placemats, the good plates, cloth napkins folded the way Mom used to do when we had guests over. That alone told me they were nervous. Lauren was already sitting down, hands clasped in front of her, eyes low. She didn't say hi. Neither did I. My dad was standing by the kitchen counter, arms crossed. My mom was fluttering around, pretending to fix things that didn't need fixing. It felt like I'd walked into a scene right before a verdict was read. I pulled out a chair and sat, not because I was ready, but because I was done stalling. My dad sat down, looked at Lauren, then me. "We need to talk before we eat." Lauren exhaled, leaned forward slightly, then started. "I lied. I lied about the job. I lied about the money. I made you all believe I was doing more than I was, and I used Mila to pull it off. I let her carry it and took the credit. She didn't cry. Thought she might, but she didn't. It almost made it more real. I didn't do it to hurt you," she continued. I was afraid of looking like a failure. And once it started, it felt easier to keep the lie going than admit the truth. There was a pause, and I realized no one at the table was breathing. And then she said something that stopped me cold. "I told them you blackmailed me, that you said you'd expose me if I didn't leave the apartment quietly, that you threatened me. It wasn't true. None of it." My mom closed her eyes. My dad looked like he'd swallowed a nail. I looked directly at Lauren. I wanted to ask why. Why go that far? Why not just tell them the truth? But I didn't. I already knew the answer. Fear, pride, maybe a little bit of envy, maybe a lot. My dad leaned in then, and for the first time in years, there was something different in his voice. We believed her, Mila, and we were wrong. We didn't just ignore the truth. We made you the villain in a story where you were the only one holding everyone up. I don't know how to fix that, but we're going to try. Then he looked at Lauren. We've told her she needs to move out. She has 3 weeks. We'll help her find a job. But after that, she's on her own. No more hiding. No more lies. That ends now. Lauren didn't argue. She didn't flinch. She just nodded almost like she'd expected it. My mom finally spoke. I think we forgot who we raised. We saw her struggling and thought she was strong for trying. But we missed everything you were doing in silence. You made things easier for all of us, and we never thanked you. We just assumed you'd keep doing it. Then she did something she hadn't done in years. She reached across the table and held my hand. We're sorry. The food sat untouched for another minute. No one said anything else. Eventually we ate, slowly, carefully. The tension didn't vanish, but it loosened. For once, no one was trying to impress, defend, or dodge. It was just quiet, real, finally. After dinner, we sat in the living room. Lauren didn't say much. My mom asked if I needed help with anything. Bills, errands, groceries, something she hadn't asked since I moved out. I said no, not because I didn't want the help, but because I needed this to settle first. As I was getting ready to leave, Lauren stood near the door. She looked exhausted, but there was something in her eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. Something like humility. I'm going to pay you back, she said. All of it. Might take time, but I will. I nodded. Didn't say I forgave her. Didn't promise anything, but I nodded. As I walked to my car, I didn't feel triumphant or satisfied. I felt tired, but lighter. The reckoning had happened. The lies were exposed. And for the first time, maybe ever, everyone was finally on the same page. Next time we sat at that table, it would be different. And I was ready for that. 3 Sundays later, I got the invite. Not from Lauren, from my dad. A short message, no frills. Dinner this weekend. Just us. No surprises. Hope you'll come. The word just us stood out. I knew what he meant. No show, no performance. No Lauren pretending everything was fine while balancing her life on the back of my bank account. I didn't respond right away. I stared at the message for hours, letting it sit there like a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to solve. Around midnight, I typed a single word. When? I pulled into their driveway. Something felt not tense, not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. Like walking into a house that used to belong to someone you knew but hadn't seen in years. The porch light was fixed. The bushes were trimmed. Someone had finally cleaned the gutter that always overflowed when it rained. I stepped inside expecting to be hit by that old feeling, that itch to keep my guard up. But instead, there was just quiet. No one rushed over. No one forced a smile. My mom was in the kitchen humming. My dad was setting the table, folding napkins like it actually mattered. For a moment, it felt like I was 10 years old again, and everything before this never happened. Dinner was simple. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, roasted carrots. No extravagant centerpieces or overpriced bakery desserts to show off. Just food, real honest food. About halfway through, my dad stood and walked to the side table. He pulled out a white envelope and slid it across to me. This doesn't fix everything, but we want to start. Inside was a check. Not a small one. It wasn't the full $21,484 I'd lost, but it was a significant chunk. More than I ever thought I'd see again. We went through the past 6 months. Every favor you did, every bill you covered. We didn't know the full scope. We should have. That's on us. My mom didn't interrupt. She just watched me. And when I finally looked up, she said something I never expected to hear from her. You were the one holding everything together, not her. You didn't ask for credit. You didn't demand anything. And we let you carry it until you collapsed under it. We're sorry, Mila. I nodded once. I didn't need a dramatic reconciliation. I needed honesty, and for the first time in a long time, I got it. Then came the knock on the door. I didn't need to see her face to know it was Lauren. She walked in slowly, almost unsure if she was allowed. Her clothes were plain, no designer coat, no oversized bag, smaller than I remembered her being. She held a small cardboard box in both hands. I watched her step forward like she was approaching a judge. "I'm not here to stay long. I just came to give you this." She handed me the box. Inside were 5 small envelopes, each one labeled with a month and a number. First payments. I've been doing freelance work, some writing stuff, some customer service. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. I started saving. "This is yours." I didn't say anything. I didn't reach for the box right away either. She looked around the room like she was afraid to stay, but afraid to leave too. "I don't expect a relationship with you. I wouldn't even blame you if you never spoke to me again. But I'm not going to lie anymore. I'm not going to take anymore. I just want to own it." Finally, then quietly, she added, "I wasn't just lying to you. I was lying to myself. I thought if I could fool everyone, maybe it would feel real. It never did." There was silence. My dad looked down. My mom exhaled. I didn't say I forgave her. I didn't make a speech. I just took the box, set it beside me, and said, "We're not going back to how it was. That's not happening." She nodded. "I know. But maybe if you keep doing the work, we can build something new." She smiled just barely. Mom asked if she wanted to stay for dessert. Lauren looked to me. I shrugged. "One slice won't kill me." So we sat, all 4 of us, eating pie from the store, not some overpriced bakery. No one tried to fill the silence. No one pretended everything was fine. But the lies were gone. That night when I left, my dad walked me out. He stood on the porch for a moment before speaking. "It feels good to tell the truth, doesn't it?" "Yeah, it does." The wind was cold, but the air felt clearer than it had in months. This wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't wrapped in a bow, but it was honest. It was real. And after everything we'd been through, that was more than enough. The family wasn't fixed, but for the first time in a long time, it wasn't broken either. Now on to the next story. Story 8. My dad left a voicemail. "Don't bother coming to the family reunion. We're cutting ties." I just texted back, "Understood." Then I quietly pulled my name from the family business loan. 36 hours later, 78 missed calls from Mom, a series of panicked emails from Dad, and a screaming voicemail from his accountant. "We need to talk." I noticed my dad's missed call just as I was about to shut down my laptop. We weren't exactly the kind of family that exchanged daily updates, so I figured it had to be something important. I played the message on the speaker as I packed my things, half listening as I shoved my laptop into its case. "Don't come to the family reunion. We're breaking up." I paused, one hand frozen on the zipper of my laptop. There it was, 7 words clear as day, his voice as flat and final as the bang of a hammer. I played it again just to make sure I hadn't misheard. "Don't come to the family reunion. We're breaking up." I stood there for a moment, the echo of his voice ringing in my head, a slow pulse of disbelief settling in. It was as simple, as coldly efficient a message as canceling a meeting or a subscription. After a long minute, I tossed my phone back on the desk, sank into my chair, and let my mind work through the layers of that sentence. Breaking up. Was he talking about our family or our business? Both. Neither. The reunion was supposed to be a big deal this year. The first time we'd all been together in years. A chance to bury old grudges and pretend for a weekend that we were a normal, functioning family. I picked up my phone again, thumbs hovering over the screen. A dozen replies flickered through my mind, each one angrier than the last. But finally, I just tapped a single word, "Okay." No punctuation, no follow-up. I put the phone down and sat back, my mind already racing over the implications. If he wanted to end things, fine. I wasn't going to beg for an explanation. But if he thought he could cut me out without a second thought, he had another thing coming. I reached down and pulled out the thick, leather-bound ledger from my bottom drawer, the one we'd used to formalize the family business loan. There was my name, a neat signature in black ink next to my parents', a testament to years of shared effort and risk. I ran my finger over it, the weight of that promise pressing down on me. Then, with a slow, deliberate stroke. I crossed my name off. The sound of the pen cutting through the paper felt like a physical act of separation. I closed the book and tossed it back in the drawer, the heavy thud echoing through the quiet office. That night, I called my attorney and outlined the steps to remove myself from the company's financial obligations. If my father wanted to play this game, I wasn't going to let him hold my future hostage. The next day, I acted quickly. I canceled my upcoming flight, erased the reunion date from my calendar, and sent a brief, professional email to my parents confirming my intention to step away from the business and requesting a full financial audit. No pleasantries, no attempts to patch things up. Just the cold, clear language of a businessman walking away from a bad deal. 36 hours later, my phone lit up with a tidal wave of missed calls. 78 from my mother alone, dozens more from my sister, and a handful from my father. I scrolled through the frantic texts, the panicked voicemails, and the increasingly desperate emails from his accountant. My father's messages began with cautious, probing questions like a man testing thin ice. But as the hours passed and my silence grew longer, they became more urgent. His words tinged with something I hadn't heard in his voice in years. Fear. His accountant, a humorless man I'd never liked, left a message that crackled with anxiety. "David, we need to talk urgently." I leaned back in my chair and let a slow smile creep across my face. I'd given them a head start, but now the storm had really hit. I was just getting started. Ignoring their cries felt good. Felt right. I knew I'd kicked a hornet's nest, but I wasn't going to stick around just to get stung. My dad wanted a clean break, and I was happy to give it to him. By the third day, the messages had gone from confused to desperate. My mother's voicemails were full of breathless pleas, her words tumbling over each other in a rush. My sister, Emily, tried a softer approach, mixing her texts with worried check-ins and half-hearted attempts at reconciliation. "Hey, David, I don't know what's going on, but I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Let's talk." I didn't answer. I knew Emily meant well, but I also knew my dad too well to think this was just a misunderstanding. If he'd called for a breakup, it meant he'd already decided I wasn't a part of his plans anymore. Then, on the fourth day, I got an email from the bank that runs the family business. I opened it cautiously, bracing myself for whatever new disaster my parents had cooked up. As I scanned the document, my jaw dropped. My father had quietly tried to transfer all the remaining funds into a separate account in his name. He'd even initiated the paperwork to dissolve the original LLC, effectively cutting me out of the picture entirely. The only reason the bank flagged it was because my name was still on some of the original documents. That was it. My dad wasn't just trying to break up the family. He was trying to cut me off completely, cleanly, and for good. He probably thought I'd sit back, too stunned or hurt to act. He didn't realize that by crossing that line, he'd given me the perfect excuse to hit back. I took a deep breath, then called my lawyer. We had a long, intense conversation, and by the end of it, the wheels were in motion for something much bigger than just removing my name from a business loan. The next morning, I pulled together every scrap of paper I had on the family business. Contracts, tax returns, emails, and financial statements. I spent hours compiling a comprehensive dossier, highlighting every shady move, every questionable expense, and every suspicious transaction my father had ever made. Years of suppressed frustration fueled my focus. And when I was done, I had a thick, damning stack of evidence. I filed an official complaint with the bank and froze all accounts pending a full audit. I also filed a request with the IRS to investigate possible tax fraud, attaching the most incriminating pieces of my dossier. I didn't know if it would stick, but I was willing to find out. Finally, just for good measure, I sent the whole package to my father's biggest client, a longtime family friend who I knew wouldn't like the idea of being involved in a potentially fraudulent deal. If my father wanted a war, I'd make sure he felt every inch of the battlefield. When I finally settled back in my chair that night, my phone buzzed again. "Emily." I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. After a long moment, I answered. "David." Her voice was small, almost shy. I could picture her curled up on her couch, probably wringing her hands the way she always did when she was worried. "Yes, I know you're angry, And I don't blame you, but can we talk? Just you and me. I paused, weighing my options. Despite everything, I didn't want to drag her into the middle of this mess. She'd always been the peacekeeper, the one who tried to hold us together when everything else fell apart. All right, I finally said. Let's meet tomorrow. As I hung up, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in days. A hint of doubt. But I pushed it away. This wasn't just business. This was personal now, and I wasn't going to back down. The next day, I met Emily at a small cafe on the edge of town. A place we used to frequent when we were broke college kids living on coffee and cheap sandwiches. She was already there, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug, her eyes darting nervously to the door every few seconds. When she saw me, her shoulders relaxed a bit, but her smile was tight, her worries still clear. We sat in awkward silence for a moment before she finally spoke. "David, what's wrong?" she asked, leaning in as if the whole cafe was listening. "Dad's losing it. Mom's a wreck. They think you're trying to destroy the business." I took a slow sip of my coffee, trying to decide how much to tell her. She deserved to know the truth, but I didn't want to drag her deeper into the mess. "They tried to cut me out completely, Dad's been moving money into a separate account, trying to dissolve the LLC behind my back. I'm just making sure they can't burn me on the way out." Her eyes went wide. "That can't be right. He wouldn't just— No, there must be some mistake." I pushed a thin folder across the table. It contained a few carefully selected pages, just enough to make my point without overwhelming her. Bank transfer requests, some questionable invoices, and a few emails in which my father had explicitly asked his accountant to speed up the separation process. She flipped through the papers, her face growing paler with each page. "Oh my God. This is a lot of money, David." She paused, her fingers trembling slightly as she held up a highlighted statement. "$75,000 just gone?" "Yes," I said, leaning back. "And that's just the beginning. He's been siphoning off funds for months, maybe years. I caught a transfer of $150,000 to a private account in his name, marked business development expenses." I leaned closer and lowered my voice. "Emily, if I hadn't retired when I did, I'd be on the hook for all of it." She closed the folder and pressed her palm flat against it, as if she could push the ugly truth back inside. "David, you have to talk to him," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "There's got to be another explanation. He's not perfect, but he's not a thief." I exhaled, my jaw clenching. "I talked to him, I gave him a chance to explain. You know what he did? He left me a 7-word voicemail that broke up the family." She looked down, her eyes filled with tears. I felt a pang of guilt, but I quickly pushed it aside. I'd made my decision. "Just please don't destroy it," she whispered. "Mom's already talking about selling the house if this blows up. I don't know if they'll survive." I stood up and dropped a 20 on the table to cover our coffees. "I'm not the one who started this, Emily, but I promise you, I'm going to finish it." As I turned to leave, she reached out and grabbed my arm. "Please, just think about it." I paused, the weight of her hand on my sleeve reminding me of the nights she used to sneak into my room as a child, terrified of thunderstorms, clinging to me like I was the only solid thing in a world of chaos. I nodded and walked out, the bell above the door ringing sharply behind me. That evening, I got a notice from the bank. The freeze on my father's accounts had gone through. They'd flagged over $250,000 in suspicious transactions, with several large, some still to be transferred. I pictured my father sitting in his office watching the numbers tick down, his carefully built financial empire unraveling by the hour. I wasn't just cutting myself loose. I was setting the whole ship on fire. I woke up the next morning to my phone buzzing like a hornet's nest. My email inbox was flooded with notifications from the bank, my lawyer, and a few panicked messages from my father's accountant. The audit had come sooner than I expected, and it was clearly making waves. I scrolled through the latest updates from the bank. They'd frozen over $400,000 in assets across several accounts and flagged another $200,000 in unexplained withdrawals going back 6 months. It was a financial stranglehold, enough to shut down the business. An hour later, My sister Emily called. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. David, what did you do? She asked, her voice cracking with fear. I did what I had to do, I replied, trying to keep my tone even. They were trying to cut me out. I just made sure they couldn't. They're freaking out, David. Dad's talking about lawyers, about pressing charges for sabotage. Mom hasn't stopped crying since yesterday. This is getting out of hand. I sat back and rubbed my temple. I hadn't expected them to crack so quickly. But then again, they'd never been good at dealing with the fallout when their plans blew up in their faces. Emily, I gave them a chance. Dad made his move and I made mine. I'm not backing down. There was a long, tense silence on the other end. I could hear her breathing. Could almost picture her gripping the phone, knuckles white with worry. Please just meet with them, she said finally. One last time. For me. I hesitated. I owed Emily at least that much. She'd always been the one to play peacemaker. The one to smooth things over when our parents' tempers flared and resentments festered. All right, I said, my voice low. But this is the last time. We met at my parents' house that night. The place looked the same as it had for decades. The carefully manicured lawn, the polished front steps, the heavy oak door that always felt more like a barrier than an invitation. My mother opened the door, her eyes red and puffy. She pulled me into a shaky hug and whispered a strained, "Thanks for coming." Inside, my father was pacing the living room. His jaw clenched so tightly I could almost hear his teeth grinding. The room felt thick with unspoken accusations, the kind of tension that made the air taste metallic. "Sit down," he said, barely looking at me. I dropped into one of the leather chairs, my eyes drifting to the family portraits lining the walls. A curated history of forced smiles and staged happiness. "So, what's this about?" I asked, leaning back. My father turned to me, his face flushed. "What the hell do you think you're doing, David? Freezing the accounts? Getting an audit? You're tearing this family apart." I met his gaze and felt a pulse of anger rise in my chest. "You tore this family apart the second you tried to cut me out. You think I wouldn't notice $250,000 disappearing into a private account? You think I'm just going to sit back and watch you destroy the company I helped build?" My mother flinched at my words, her hand covering her mouth as if she could physically hold back her shock. My father's face twisted, his eyes sharp and angry. "You have no idea what you've done. I've got deals in the pipeline, investments in place. If you freeze these accounts, it could ruin everything." "That's not my problem," I shot back. "You made your decision when you tried to cut me out of the business. I'm just protecting what's mine." There was a long, tense silence broken only by the low hum of the refrigerator in the next room. Then my dad leaned in, his voice deep and dangerous. "Fine. You want to play hardball? You want to burn this family down? I'll show you what it really looks like." I felt a flicker of unease, a cold twist of foreboding in my gut, but I forced myself to hold his gaze. I come too far to back down now. Emily stepped between us, her hands raised like a referee trying to break up a street fight. "Please stop, both of you. This isn't helping." I stood up and grabbed my jacket. "You wanted me here, Emily. I came, but I'm done trying to reason with him." I turned and walked out, my mother's soft sobs echoing behind me as I slammed the door. As I got into my car, my phone buzzed with a new email, a message from my lawyer. My parents had just filed a lawsuit, claiming that I had sabotaged the business and illegally taken control of their accounts. I let out a bitter laugh and threw my phone on the passenger seat. So this was how they wanted to play it. Fine. I'd given them a chance to walk away. Now I'd make sure they had nothing left to fight for. The lawsuit hit me harder than I expected. My father had gone nuclear, accusing me of everything from embezzlement to corporate sabotage. His claims were outrageous, but the stakes were real. If he could convince a judge that I'd illegally seized the accounts, I could be on the hook for hundreds of thousands in damages. I spent the next week buried in legal documents, my lawyer working overtime to counter each new motion they filed. My parents had even dragged Emily into it, calling her as a witness against me, probably hoping to break my resolve. Stung, but I couldn't blame her. She was stuck in the middle, trying to keep the family from imploding. Then, 2 days before the first court date, I received a message from my father's accountant. I'd assumed the man was on my parents' side, but this time his tone was different, nervous, almost pleading. "David, we need to meet in private. There are things you need to know." I met him that night in a quiet bar on the outskirts of town. He was already there when I arrived, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his trembling hand. He looked older than I remembered, his usually crisp shirt rumpled, his eyes hollow. He waved me over, his eyes darting nervously around the room. "David, I shouldn't be here. If they find out." "Relax," I said, sitting down across from him. "Just tell me what this is about." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Your father. He's been hiding money for years. Offshore accounts, shell companies, under-the-table cash deals. At first, I thought it was just a tax dodge, but it's much worse." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I'd expected some financial mismanagement, maybe a bit of creative accounting, but this sounded like a whole other level of deception. He slid a flash drive across the table, his hand shaking so badly I thought he might spill his drink. "Everything you need is on here. Bank statements, wire transfers, even some less-than-legal contracts. It's enough to sink him completely." I pocketed the drive, my mind racing. If this was real, it could turn the whole trial on its head. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, eyeing him closely. He drained the last of his whiskey, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. "Because I'm not going down with them, David. I have a family to protect, too." That night, I sat in my office, the computer screen flickering as I scrolled through the files. It was all there. Years of dirty dealings, false invoices, unreported income, and shady offshore transfers. Over $750,000 had been quietly siphoned out of the company with my father's name on every transaction. The next morning, I sent everything to my lawyer along with a note. "Let's get this over with." By the time the court date arrived, my parents were backed into a corner. Their accounts were frozen, their business reputation was in tatters, and now, with this new evidence, they were staring down the barrel of potential criminal charges. My father's face was a mask of fury as he entered the courtroom. His eyes locked on mine with a mixture of betrayal and barely contained rage. My mother looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Her shoulders slumped, her eyes rimmed with red. The judge took less than an hour to rule. The evidence was overwhelming. The case was dismissed and the court ordered a full forensic audit of my parents' finances. I watched my father's face crumble as reality set in. He hadn't just lost the business. He'd lost everything. A week later, Emily called. She'd found my parents a small apartment in a rundown complex on the edge of town, barely a fraction of the sprawling home they once owned. She didn't ask for my help and I didn't offer it, but I sent them a few months' rent. More for her sake than theirs. As for me, I signed the final papers to dissolve the family business, severing the last financial ties between us. My father had always said that family and business shouldn't mix. And in the end, he was right. Emily still calls, checking in now and then, always careful to avoid the subject of our parents. I know she's still hoping for a miracle, some last-minute reconciliation, but I'm not sure I have it in me. Maybe one day I'll sit down with them and listen to whatever excuses they come up with. Maybe I'll even let them back into my life, just enough to keep Emily from having to choose sides. But for now, I'm content to let the silence stretch out. My parents left with nothing but each other, their empire reduced to dust. A few months have passed and the dust has mostly settled. My parents are still in that cramped apartment on the edge of town, a far cry from the sprawling house they once flaunted like a badge of honor. Emily tells me they're struggling to adjust. Their pride bruised, their savings depleted by legal fees and back taxes. She called me last week, her voice hesitant. "They want to see you, David. They're trying to make things right." I let her words hang in the air for a moment, the familiar weight of old wounds settling in my chest. I didn't answer right away. I knew she'd already taken on the burden of caring for them, paying some of their bills when their accounts were frozen, helping them move into that dingy apartment. She was the only one left who believed in the possibility of forgiveness. "All right," I finally said. "I'll come." Yesterday, I drove over and parked my car in the cracked lot in front of their new building. The walls were thin, the paint peeling, the hallways heavy with the smell of fried food and old carpet. I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over the doorbell, the memories of our last explosive encounter replaying in my mind. When my father opened the door, I barely recognized him. He looked smaller, his shoulders hunched, his hair thinner, his eyes clouded with something that looked a lot like regret. My mother stood behind him, her face pale and drawn, her eyes watering as she reached out to hug me. We sat in their tiny living room, the mismatched furniture and cluttered shelves a stark contrast to the polished, perfect home they used to show off. They stumbled through their apologies, their voices strained and uncertain, as if they'd forgotten how to speak to me without a trace of authority. "We made mistakes," my father said, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. "We thought we could fix it, keep the family together, but we went too far." I listened, my face a careful mask, my heart a quiet, uncertain throb in my chest. Part of me wanted to get up, walk out, and never look back. But another part, the part that still remembered family game nights, long drives to the beach, and the way my dad taught me to fix bikes in the garage, kept me in my seat. After a long, awkward silence, my mother reached out, her hand trembling as it covered mine. "Please, David, let's start over." I didn't promise them anything. I just nodded, got up, and left. Now, as I sit here staring at that blinking cursor, I'm not sure I made the right choice. Maybe I should have just walked away and let them live with the consequences of their actions. But part of me hopes that maybe, just maybe, some broken things can be put back together. So, Reddit, did I do the right thing? We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.